Hello everyone and welcome to the Superhero Rewind Commentary Project. It's me, Captain Logan, and joining me as always is my sidekick, Austin, the Day Ghost. And tonight, Austin and I are going back to the late 90s once again. We've been covering lately quite a few things that I did in the real early days of Superhero Rewind, the old scripted program, and stuff that was, much newer back then, Austin, from about a decade prior. We did Spawn a few weeks ago, and we did Mystery Men that same night. Tonight, we're not doing a double feature. We're just doing a singular movie, and we're going to tackle Wesley Snipes' Blade. And I'm holding up the box of the 4 film favorites box. That's how I have this right now. So we're not doing all 4 of these, but we're just doing the first Blade film. We'll try to cover Blade 2 sometime in the not too distant future, though, Austin, because it was really fun revisiting this. I haven't seen this in a really long time. I certainly haven't watched it since the Marvel Mania, and I don't think I'd seen it since the Rewind even before that. So I'm very curious and interested to watch that again, because I remember not a lot about that. I mean, I remember the weird way we bring Whistler back, and I remember the Reapers and how cool and creepy their faces were, and that's about what I remember from that movie.
Mm-hmm. You don't remember his Powerpuff Girls watching sidekick?
Is that a thing?
Yeah, he's got a sidekick that's Norman Reedus, and he watches Powerpuff Girls.
I'm sure I talked about that in the Marvel Mania, but I don't remember that in the moment right now.
Mm-hmm. I figured that would be the only detail you remember.
You know what? We'll do a double feature that night for that. Then we'll do that in the Powerpuff Girls movie on the same night. That's what we'll do.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Isn't that a great idea?
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen Powerpuff Girls, so my only experience is Blade 2.
He can't tell if I'm joking, and neither can you, and I'm going to keep it that way. Austin, are you wondering what the 4th film in the 4 film favorites is?
Yeah, I've been going back and forth in my head, because I'm like, did they label the show as a...
Yes, it's the pilot for the Spike TV show, which of course David Goyer also wrote and worked on, wrote some of. Did you know that Jeff Johns worked on that show?
I didn't. No.
Yeah, it's universally hated or just maligned as dull and boring and nothing. The way people, I've never watched it. The way people talk about it reminds me of the RoboCop shows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have.
But it's pretty crazy that Goyer and Johns were both on it, and it's apparently that meh.
Well, I think isn't it supposed to be a sequel to the trilogy or connected to it? I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, it's supposed to take place after Blade Trinity. It's in continuity, which immediately lost people because, of course, it's not Wesley Snipes. And it's some lookalike guy who doesn't look like he had acted before, at least in the commercials. But that's not fair because I've never actually sat down and watched it. And I own that show, so I have the pilot in 2 places physically. Isn't that great? Yeah.
Well, and I have the Marvel Legends figure of Spike TV Blade.
No, you don't. Is that a thing? Was it a Build-A-Figure?
It was a Build-A-Figure.
That's the only way anybody would buy it.
Yeah, do you know who the Build-A-Figure was?
No, I thought you were... Oh, I thought maybe he was the Build-A-Figure.
No, he was just one of them in the line.
Okay, but like people bought it so that so that you could get the build. Okay, what was the Build-A-Figure?
It was Man-Thing.
Of course it was.
But the line was weird. It was Daredevil from Netflix, Elektra from Netflix, Jessica Jones, and Blade from Spike TV, and then I think 2 comic ones, but I can't remember who they were.
Interesting.
It was a weird line.
Well, I don't want to do too much preamble before we get into the movie, so we'll do that here pretty soon. Thanks a lot for watching live. If you're here right now, as always, you can help steer our conversation as we watch the film by leaving comments and super chats if you were so inclined. We appreciate anybody and everybody just for watching, but also thanks for the support for folks that choose to do that. And of course, you can, quick plug for Patreon, you can become a Superhero Rewind producer at Patreon at the $10 tier. That's patreon.com/geekvolution. And for those of you watching live right now or within the next 24 hours or so, Austin and I and some folks in the Superhero Rewind Discord are going to meet tomorrow night and watch The Dark Knight Rises all together. So if you would like to join the Discord to hang out with me and Austin and watch a movie that I don't particularly like but will be fun to watch with a group, nevertheless, come pop in and do that. We decided to pick a not as good one this time. Mm-hmm. No offense to anybody that still loves Rises.
Yeah, well, I think you let everybody vote for a bad movie, and the first one to say anything was Dark Knight Rises, and I was like, Howard the Duck.
Which I had to second immediately.
But
I was excited that most everybody in that call thought that was a thing to pick. I was like, okay, cool, that'll be fun. That'll be fun to do with these guys. But hey, you can come in even if you like it, okay? Like nobody's gonna mind that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, so that's the news that's fit to print. Austin, real briefly, what is your background with this franchise?
So I watched Blade Trinity a lot when I was like 10. My mom was like, the Blade movies are not appropriate for children, even though she never really cared about anything like that. But she said Blade Trinity is the only one that's okay for kids. It's just the first 2.
Weird, and I know that this movie is tamer than other things you were allowed to watch when you were a kid.
No, exactly. And Blade Trinity, I think, is the most vulgar of the 3. And then years later, I found out it was because she just didn't really like the first 2. And I think only wanted to watch 3 because Ryan Reynolds. I don't know.
Okay. Eclectic taste.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to make this the Bash Austin's mom show, but just the things you've told me about her tastes are kind of shocking.
It's real hit or miss. She'll like really great things and then be like, oh, here's this like completely awful thing that I love.
Robotters100 in the comments says Trinity is hot trash compared to the other 2. It's night and day, almost literally.
No, exactly.
Like, it doesn't even feel like it fits tonally in the same franchise, and the guy that wrote the other 2 wrote and directed it. It's bewildering. But
exactly.
Getting ahead of ourselves, like I said, first time I've seen this in a real long time, and I was surprised by, first of all, how many things I was comparing it to in my brain that I hadn't made comparisons to before, and I won't reveal any of that right now. But the other thing, Austin, is I think I've been kind of unduly... or kind of unfair to this movie in the way I've discussed it in other things, not just looking directly at it, in its influence, because I think it is more influential than I've ever given it credit for. Visually, especially.
I think we debated about that in the, I guess maybe the 3rd episode of our history of superhero movies. Whichever one we hit that area. I feel like we kind of debated about how impactful Blade was.
Well, retroactively, I'll say you won that argument.
Sounds about right.
Okay, are you ready to watch it?
Yeah.
We encourage you to watch it along with us if you're able to and so inclined. But of course, as always, we will make this a podcast as well as a commentary. We'll try to provide as much... Sorry, I'm having to change my volume here. This was going to be very, very loud for me. We will provide as much context as humanly possible as we're watching the film and discussing it. And we're going to start right away with, you should be looking at a blood red New Line Cinema logo. Is everybody ready to get started? Or are we
Yep.
ready to begin? Okay, and I'll have if you're watching the film on or the commentary on YouTube, you'll see a clock there so that you can line up with us if you have any difficulty with that as we go. And here we are. Everybody, please press play right now. So once again, we just did a New Line film just a few weeks ago, and it was Spawn. And that came out just the year before this. And again, kind of night and day. It's very odd that the studio put out both of those movies, and one was such a flop and failure commercially and critically, and the other was on the opposite end of that. In a lot of ways, especially the way this movie is presented visually, this is kind of what I want from a Spawn film. I don't mean to say that it's one-to-one, that this is like exactly a Spawn story, of course, and I can always make comparisons with anything, demonic and a character that, I mean, this is not a character back from the dead, but a world of people that are kind of ostensibly undead, but not really. Like, you can make some comparisons, but it's definitely what that audience more would have been looking for, I think.
Well, and I talked with Spawn about how, I used to watch that movie a lot on our version of Cartoon Network whenever they had like Friday night or Saturday night movies, and Blade 1 and 2 came up a lot. It was like those three movies I feel like were played like once every 2 months.
I'm glad we didn't do this with that as a double feature, because that would have just been unfair.
Oh, it would have been super unfair. Although, I mean, it was unfair to do Mystery Men with it, too.
I like the blood red New Line logo. I think it was kind of cool they did that. It's not horribly gimmicky. It doesn't, like, transform into something with, like, blood raining down or anything. It's just red. That's fun.
Yeah, I've never really thought about it until just right now, but it is interesting how New Line's kind of, like, in the center of this genre right now.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that either.
Turtles, Spawn, and Blade, and neither the superhero genre has taken off, nor has New Line, because we're still like, what, 2 years away from Lord of the Rings?
Yeah. Is that New Line?
Yep.
I didn't remember that. But of course, they had a pedigree for, in a history of horror films. And so all this stuff kind of fits right in there for them. Ninja Turtles was more off the beaten path.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, this and Spawn make more sense with like their Nightmare stuff. Although Ninja Turtles gets the Nightmare sequel treatment where they just kind of keep pumping them out and get worse and worse.
Does this girl, especially in the scene in the car that we've just passed before they get into the meatpacking plant, it's like Scary Rocky. Does she not remind you a little bit of Jessica Priest? Like, for a second, I thought that was the same actress.
Oh, I didn't have that. I was thinking there's like a newer Mortal Kombat vampire character named Scarlet that's a redhead, and I was thinking about that.
Oh, interesting. This movie also has a little bit in common with Mortal Kombat.
When they played Mortal Kombat at one point.
Do they really?
The movie, yeah, that's the movie they're watching in Frost's, I don't know, loft.
Oh, you blew my mind with that. Well, that's cool.
I had to rewind, but I'm pretty sure that's like the reptile CGI. I could be wrong, but I think that's what that is.
That's, of course, a natural touchstone for this material, something I imagine they would be looking at with fight scenes and stuff, because that movie loves Hong Kong action just like this does, but this has an actual story like some of those Hong Kong action movies. And some of the special effects are obviously much, much better than that, and some of them are a little bit on par, just because this movie is so ambitious. And it almost went even more ambitious at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mortal Kombat's also New Line, I think.
Well, that's true. Man, we should just make a list of all of the genre stuff and comic-esque stuff that New Line does, because once you say that, I remember that logo in front of it, but I didn't have that thought until you brought that up.
Yeah. No, I'm having like a real moment of realization with early New Line right now.
No, it's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. And that's really cool.
I feel like this is one of those movies that is both real dated, obviously real 90s, and kind of ahead of its time all at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking a little bit of Spider-Man too, with not Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man as well. Just in terms of how this movie is like very much kind of like a distillation of the genre, while also feeling like its own thing and not being like anything that came before it.
Well, the big irony for me with this movie has always been it's a character that most people had never heard of and didn't realize was based on any particular comic book, but it is, in a lot of ways, the most comic book looking movie and one of the best, if not the best, adaptations as far as a comic to screen thing in looking so much like a comic book and being that stylized. I'd say at this point, your trifecta is in no particular order this, The Crow, and Batman.
Mhm.
And Ninja
Absolutely.
Turtles gets maybe an honorable mention.
Mhm. Yeah, and I also think that a big part of the popularity of this movie comes to how strong this opening is and setting just the perfect introduction to this material.
Yeah, it gets so much right for the day right away. It establishes tone. It lets you know that it's not for kids, that it's a very adult kind of movie. I've talked about this before, but kind of famously for me with our audience, I had a difficult time as a teenager watching this movie. I was that undesensitized, and with all the blood at the beginning, I just couldn't deal with it. It's real visceral. They did a great job on it. I mean, now I don't want to say it's quaint, but like I don't have any problem with it at this point with everything I've seen.
Mhm.
But it's
It's just a cool idea of bringing vampires to the modern day of just let's have this big like rave party and have blood rain down from the ceiling.
and then the action is insanely strong right away.
Mhm.
We see stuff we don't see a lot in American action cinema at this time, and it's just insanely, undeniably stylish. It also just sounds like a real hip kind of movie at the time, and obviously The Matrix will sound exactly like this movie a year after this. It also looks a lot like The Matrix before The Matrix, which is
Well, and
interesting because
on to the
Matrix couldn't have
introduction.
taken too many cues from this, but in some ways it feels almost ripped off in places.
Mhm. No, absolutely. No, and part of that, introduction of just setting it off right from the get go is just this is just such a strong image of everybody soaked in blood, and Blade walks in and he doesn't have a single drop on
It's
him.
wonderful, and that's the other great way that as you say, that it establishes tone because it kind of screams this will be dark and gritty and rough around the edges, and with the opening origin thing with Blade's birth, which we didn't talk about, it kind of suggests that there will be a like heaviness, a weightiness to it, a real world kind of element to it, but that it's not going to take itself too seriously,
No,
and
we're
and that
willing to
it's
go to some of those like cheesy action
it's
movie
yeah, it's really
places.
walking that line right
Mhm.
where you can like it feels real within the context of it, but it's going to gradually as the movie goes become more and more outlandish and comic booky, and it really gets away with that.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
And it gets crazier as it goes, and I don't think it ever really jumps the shark. And I'm going to argue, Austin, besides dated CG and stuff, which we're already seeing some of right now,
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
the vampires disintegrating into skeleton forms. But if they had stuck with the big blood monster ending, I think it still wouldn't have really jumped the shark. I think that's set up and alluded to well enough that if that had stayed in the movie, I still would have bought it as of this piece, whether or not you're happy that they changed from that ending. And I think ultimately I am, but I think it would have made sense at least on paper.
No, I mean it's got that kind of old school Hollywood idea of you start small and you just keep building, right? So it doesn't ever really feel like it jumps the shark because it's just constantly building on itself in small enough ways.
I this area, this club feels a lot like we're comparing this to other movies both from before this and after this, but there's also this video game component to this movie too, and like there's a lot of Mortal Kombat in it. Particularly at the end, I feel like the fight with Frost at the end is just a Mortal Kombat fight, especially
The
once you
arena.
once you see his spine and the like the blood monster inside of him and just some of the moves and stuff. But this feels like a Quake arena to me.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Can you explain to me why Blade does that move?
Does that?
Yeah.
I
I
don't
made
I
it
don't
the
know.
thumbnail. It cracks me up so much.
I don't know. That's like maybe a place where it goes a little too far with like the action movie silliness, but like I also don't mind it.
I like that Blade has kind of a fun, uh, like playground side, for lack of a better way to put it, where like he enjoys what he's doing because he hates the vampires and wants revenge on them so much, and like he's really cold otherwise. But when he gets into these action scenes, he is like I said, a kid on the playground.
Hmm.
He's at Disneyland in those scenes.
Absolutely, no, stuff like that is where
And I think
you're
it's partly
seeing
why he's
Wesley
likable.
Snipes. Yeah,
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
no, I was just saying it's moments like that where you're seeing Wesley Snipes and kind of what he's adding to the role.
Dan Schneider, $2 super chat. Thanks, man. He says this and the Matrix were influenced by the same things. Yes, of course.
Certainly.
Especially with the Hong Kong action and all of that. And I'll speak to that in a second. But first, I just want to say, Austin, this shot right here, if we're looking at the same scene, with Blade walking in front of the trash can, is one of my favorite shots in anything, superhero movie wise.
Oh, that's great.
And that's the big thing Spawn was missing.
Hmm. No, and I also feel like that's like a step above some of the stuff we're doing like that in Ninja Turtles as well.
Yeah. Do you notice also, and I'll talk a lot about consistency in this commentary, particularly with mythology, but do you notice that when we do those like atmospheric outdoor shots at night, we're constantly seeing papers flying everywhere with the wind. It's not just that shot, we keep doing it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's almost like a Western, like the tumbleweed.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, you beat me to it. I was going to bring that up. And there's a lot of Western stuff in this movie. I mean, that's why the casting for Whistler is what it is.
Yeah.
That's why that's Chris Christopherson.
Yeah, well, and that character in general, I think is playing with some of the tropes that you see in some Westerns.
Because he was almost cast for a different archetype. Do you know about this? He was nearly cast with the guy who played the lead in the British Prisoner TV show. And that would have been like a posh British version, and they would have gone a lot more in like a Cagliostro direction with it.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
Huh.
And they very nearly did that. And then when they cast him, it became a completely different kind of character.
Hmm.
So do you buy that these two people ever dated? Because I don't.
No comment. Maybe, I don't know.
He doesn't seem like her
seems-
type to me.
He seems like a little too nerdy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I don't mean because it's interracial and she and Blade have sexual
actually-
chemistry. I don't mean that. I'm just saying
No, because you know what I was thinking?
he seems too lame to me to date her. She seems too cool for him.
No, you know what I was thinking? Because I wasn't even thinking about it from a racial standpoint. But
I just want to say that in case anybody else was thinking that's what I meant by it.
no, you know in Doctor Strange where there's like the like worst surgeon that he doesn't like,
Yeah.
and he has that comment about whether Palmer's sleeping with him, and
Yeah.
she's like, "What?" It would be like if they were dating, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, there's some really good horror timing in this movie, and it's not straight up a horror movie, but obviously
It's got some of those trappings.
obviously it's got those trappings, and I think it really walks the line between three things really. I mean, horror movie, superhero comic book thing, and Hong Kong-esque action movie.
Mhm.
And
I mean, it's mixing all the things you love, right? Like it's one of those projects.
yeah, and the horror the horror timing is good comedic timing, I think. That goes on like a little bit too long, where you've got this like former couple that you do not care about yet.
Mhm.
And I love how that pays off
Really?
toward the end too. I mean, there's a lot of really nice setup and payoff throughout this whole movie, particularly with Blade's weapons.
Yeah, sorry, that's one of my favorite.
That's a
lines
Matrix
of
shot?
his. Yeah,
Out the window?
yeah, it absolutely is. Josh just sent a super chat, and I'm glad that he did because I'd actually forgotten about this.
I
was
hope
gonna
you know
like
more
a
about
month
this than
ago.
I do.
What's that?
I said, I hope you know more about his super chat than I do. $5 super chat. He says,
I
Fincher's
do, yeah.
involvement is so interesting. I spent money to hear y'all talk about it. Tee. The only thing I know about Fincher is that he showed up to the set one day. That's all I know.
No, this movie starts as him and Goyer making a Blade movie. Like he was going to direct it, and then he stepped down to do Seven, I think.
Is that true? Because Goyer pitches it to New Line with a different director that is not Fincher.
See, with I read like a little bit ago that it was Fincher and Goyer that pitched it.
That's not what I read.
Interesting.
I'm gonna look into this real quick and see if I can find it.
Yeah, because I also read about this like a few months ago, maybe.
I went into this is, grain of salt. This is just on Wiki, but it says when Goyer heard a film was in development, he went in to pitch with director Ernest Dickerson.
Oh, okay. Maybe he was attached to it later.
Fincher's idea in the first place?
I was under the impression
because before
that they pitched
Goyer was
together.
involved, I know LL Cool J was interested in it, or they were interested in him.
Mm-hmm.
That was all the way
That
back in
would've
'92.
been a different movie.
Considering that this is a thing that most people, again, a property people weren't familiar with, it's kind of interesting just how long it was in development.
And not even really a like just that, but also like Blade doesn't really have like a comic legacy. Like he does obviously, but like when you think of Blade, you're thinking of these movies, like, and then we have comics after this that try to do these movies that do a bad job of it.
When I watched this with my son Jason, he commented on how great that transition is from inside that building to the sky.
Mm-hmm.
It's really nice editing in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
He also sorry, we also kept talking about the Matrix while we were watching it, and he made the comment that it has the same blue tint that the first Matrix movie does, and that it would be really funny to see somebody make it green for no reason, just because the Matrix went back and did that.
Well, they should go back and make it red because it's vampires.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, all I mean is because Blade's like a secondary character in like Tomb of Dracula and some of that horror stuff.
Yeah.
In the comics, so like it's weird that going all the way back, they're already trying to make this into a movie. But it's also one of the easier Marvel things to make into a movie this early.
Yeah, I think something that we don't think about as much now with this is that it doesn't really get made as much because comic book things are more in. That has something to do with probably why it finally comes out now with the success of Batman and everything. But still weirdly late, because by the time this finally comes out, Warner's is kind of done messing with Batman because Batman and Robin wasn't successful. That's just the year before this. And this is the same year that Steel comes out.
No, Steel's also 97.
Oh, that's right. I always think it's 98. But anyway, I think something you can't count out is just how popular vampires are at this period.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
So it's like, what kind of property do we have access to?
And because of what I was saying about comic book Blade, he's a blank slate that you can easily do whatever you want with.
Yeah, this has that in common with The Mask, where it's like you take an initial, and I know I talk about that movie all the time, but you take an initial idea that's maybe not anybody's favorite thing on the page, and because it's a potential cool, image and initial premise and title and stuff, you do whatever you want to with it, and you can have your cake and eat it too, because you're not going to have this big fan base that's upset with you for not sticking to source material.
Mm-hmm. No, and you can maybe win them over too.
Yeah, because this is a case where sticking to source material would not have been the thing to do, just because it would have felt too dated, and it wouldn't be as interesting to have a character who is immune to turning into a vampire but doesn't really have any other powers besides, which is what Blade was before this. He doesn't get this power set until this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because
I think the very next year in the comics, he gets his backstory and superpowers from then.
No, I think it's interesting because doing comic book Blade here is the wrong choice, but I think doing it now is the right choice, because when rebooting Blade, they should not be making diet these movies.
No, absolutely not. If you want to look at these movies at all for inspiration, you've got to ramp it up even from these, and I don't know exactly how you do that. And I don't want to get too in the weeds with what you should do with another Blade movie.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying
as we're
that,
discussing this.
you're saying that,
But I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because the required reading for Blade is these first two movies. And I've mentioned this in other videos, but it's always cracked me up because I have a Marvel encyclopedia that has required reading for all these different characters. And when you get to Blade, it just lists the movies. It doesn't say anything about comics. And that was like early 2000s when that book came out.
Mhm. No, I've seen that book too. Also, the vampires just hang out in Doctor Evil's hideout. That table with those chairs, it's like the exact same thing.
We
It's
should talk
awesome.
about the ways in which the vampire mythology and the society, the status quo in this movie was very against type and turning stuff on its head from what was traditionally thought about with vampires at the time, but not so much now, which is partly why I say this movie is more influential than I gave it credit for, because I struggled on this viewing, Austin, in preparation for this, appreciating just how fresh and unique this world of vampires is.
Yeah, no, and
Because at the
these
time it
movies-
was, and we've done plenty of not as gothic or neo-gothic vampire stuff since this, and we've also had a lot of present day vampire movies and TV shows and stuff since then. And at the time, it was a novelty just for this stuff to be set in present day, because it was pretty much just this and Buffy, and like the end of, maybe there's other stuff I don't know about, but not a ton, right? And then like the end of Interview with a Vampire, like the bookend.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, these movies I think left a big impact on me specifically. Because when I write about vampire stuff, like when I'm doing my own things, it tends to be this kind of like parallel for like the elite that this movie's doing. And I've never really thought about it as an inspiration, but I was thinking about that today, and that I think that's just kind of always stuck with me is that's what they should be a metaphor for. Because that's obviously not what stuff like Dracula is doing.
Yeah,
Maybe Carmilla.
no, that's a great point. There is, obviously, commentary here, satire here about big business and about how the people at the top never have the masses' best interests at heart and treat regular people as like cannon fodder or as cattle, as the purebloods here. And I guess even the turned vampires call humans, and it makes Frost in his way a little bit more sympathetic. I mean, obviously he's still a real over the top villain that at the end of the day wants to rule the world, but he is. The other side of the coin for Blade, or has something in common with Blade, in that both of them have their feet firmly in kind of two different worlds. And for the turn vampires, they're not looked at; they're like second class citizens to the purebloods, and they're looked at as like halflings. Or something, because they weren't born that way, and that makes them not as good. And it's, for a minute you kind of sympathize with them because it's as arbitrary as racism or as, hating mutants just because they're born different, like with X-Men. I mean, he's basically the Magneto of the vampire world and has the same plot that Magneto in the first X-Men movie will have, which is also
When we
funny.
go as far with that race
Yeah.
element, to have Deacon Frost refer to Blade as a Black Tom, or is that what it's Uncle Tom?
No, it's an
sorry.
Uncle Tom. Yeah, he
Uncle
sure
Tom
does.
for vampires, like not even, in a race way.
And you know why that works?
Why is that?
Because it feels on the nose if the movie is constantly talking about race because we have a black protagonist, but it doesn't, so it makes it a metaphor. It's really cool because it's like we're that line wouldn't work if Blade was white, but because he's a black guy and it's never discussed, it actually feels really kind of clever and a smart thing to bring up in that scene.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
Yeah, I was
rewatching
taken
it, I was
aback
like,
by that line. I was also taken aback by the
yeah.
staircase. This set is wild.
Yeah. where does that staircase go?
I don't know.
Because I don't know if that's a door. If it is, it's really small.
Yeah, this is where Blade lives. I didn't think it was multiple levels, but I guess it is.
He lives in like an
There's
Escher
like
painting.
1.5. There's a whole symbolic thing we're doing with this plant that I don't fully appreciate or understand. There's a commentary where Wesley Snipes rambles on about it, and I still don't fully appreciate what he's getting at with it. And I can't decide if it was his idea or if he just latched onto it after they made the movie.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't even thought about that as a thing.
There's a whole moment after Whistler dies where he pulls. We keep cutting to it, and then he pulls the plant out and he cuts the roots out from under it. And in the commentary, Wesley Snipes rambles on about I don't know, something with like Whistler and
Whistler's gone, so he's lost like his roots.
Yeah, well, and what I was gonna say, something about his principles, his values. And that, like, he lost Whistler, he cuts the roots out from under him, and so he no longer has, he no longer cares about the principles that Whistler, gave him and that he was trying to live up to, and so now he can just go off and do anything he needs to do. And I don't think that really affects the story or how he handles anything in the third act in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't see him acting any more or less ruthless than he did before.
I mean, he does in that he drinks blood, but like that's, for a specific reason.
And he would do that anyway. It's not part of his coldness or his ruthlessness.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of something he has to do because he's dying, and he can't fight.
And he resists it really hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
If he left there and immediately started mowing down human beings, no questions asked, that may or may not even be working with the vampires, be familiars, or he doesn't know if they're vampires or not, like, you'd have something there, but he doesn't do anything any more, like, morally bereft or ambiguous than he had done before. That's what that implies that he would be doing, so I don't really understand that.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
But I also feel like the third act, and this is my biggest complaint with the movie, Austin, degenerates a little bit too much into typical superhero fare, and also does the same thing that Batman does in that it establishes one or two tropes that we cannot get away from in a lot of superhero movies after this. Particularly the villain that wants to transform everybody into whoever he is, or into whatever he is. And we always blame X-Men for that, but I always forget that this did it first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's weird, right? Because it's both Magneto's plan and Blackheart's plan from Ghost Rider. It's like we split those two off into those two movies because you have the whole like blood god thing, and then you have the whole turning everybody into vampires, which is a weird plan if you're a vampire because it's turning all of your food into not food, I would think.
Yes, and there's a deleted scene that was supposed to explain it.
Oh, okay.
And it still doesn't explain it well enough to me, but it should have been left in the movie, which is, and I don't really understand why they took it out. And they shot it. It's on the DVD. But they're already stockpiling humans that they're going to keep alive just to feed vampires.
You know what? I did know that because...
And they were supposed to be in like these blood
big
bank
plot point in 3,
capsules or something.
And I knew that it was a deleted scene from 1, and I forgot about it until you said it.
Yeah. And that would have been another thing that it oddly has in common with The Matrix. Because they would have been, they wouldn't have them hooked up into like a nice dream world, but they'd be keeping the only humans that are left around to feed them. Mm-hmm. And we haven't really talked about, story and, thematic ways that this is just like The Matrix, but I don't know if we've gotten to it yet, but Blade has this whole speech to, what is her name? Help me out, because I've just forgotten it in the moment here. Her name is Karen.
Karen
Johnson. Dr. Karen Johnson.
You gave me your mind wipe by questioning it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to Men in Black you. This also reminds me of Men in Black a little bit, in that you have a secret society of something ostensibly supernatural or something that people would argue about whether it exists, and people like Karen don't believe that it's really there until they're forced to face it. It made me want Blade versus Men in Black.
That'd be interesting.
It'd be kind of fun if Men in Black existed in a world where there was also a vampire underground, but neither of them knows the other one exists.
Can we have Blade versus Men in Black versus 21 Jump Street?
But anyway, you've got, I forgot what we were talking about.
What were we talking about?
I went on like 35 different tangents there.
Exactly. We got another super chat.
Yeah, let's go ahead and knock that out real quick.
Bob the Hun gave $2. He says Blade and Matrix are both influenced by anime.
Yeah, naturally, and this has homages directly to Japanese culture in a couple of big places.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to say that's probably part of why we gave him the specific sword that we did.
Oh, I want it.
And it's also got like
yes.
a Mad Maxy car. Like we're kind of mixing influences with stuff like that.
Yeah, and in the commentary that features a lot of different people that worked on this movie, they all talk about Mad Max in various places. Even Wesley Snipes brings that up.
Mm-hmm. Well, in Blade, he's got like an underrated movie car. I feel like.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that is
and
a cool
it's in
car.
all three of them. I think. I'm pretty sure.
Is it?
Yeah, and like I said, it is kind of close to the Mad Max car, but it's not a 1-for-1.
So
it is a cool car.
So yeah, I wanted to talk about Matrix comparisons. That's where I was going with that. First of all, the thing with the sword that you mentioned, it was supposed to have more of a history where it wouldn't be like a mystical artifact, but it would kind of feel like that, where Whistler. I don't know if he was supposed to get it from somebody that used it even farther back, but like it has this big long history and is special in some way, and they kind of axed all of that. Mm-hmm. But it sort of feels like there's an inkling of that left at the end when Frost starts going on about what it's made out of. Where you're like, this is supposed to be like an Excalibur kind of thing, where hero who's kind of the chosen one. And by the way, the MacGuffin of his own story in the same way Superman is in Man of Steel, and handled way better than that. Like in exactly the same way, where it's like your blood is the key to our race and keeping us alive, or having us be dominant of the earth. Like, it's the same thing.
That's true. Yeah, I'd never really thought about that.
That's gonna be this whole commentary. Is just, did you
like
know that Blade is everything? Do you have any idea that Blade is every movie you've ever seen? Because it is.
Well, that's why I was thinking of Spider-Man. Like, there's just so many things.
I didn't think of that either.
Like, it's just, it's kind of just everything in a way, and it feels like it, is the like not prototypical, but just like the distillation of everything, but.
So the Matrix, and not just because of techno, which we just heard.
Also with the Matrix,
some more of. Yeah,
I think it's really interesting that Blade is like half Neo and Morpheus at the same time.
Yes,
while love interest is like the other half of Neo.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. Why do you say that?
Well, because she's like the Aizen character that's brought in, but Blade is like the one character. So you kind of split Neo into two halves, and half of him goes to her.
That's a good point. Well, that was the big thing I was going to mention, is that you've got
Blade also has to be Morpheus.
Yeah, you've got that big speech about the real world. It's crazy that both movies use exactly that terminology, right? Because in The Matrix, it's more literal, of course, but with this, it's... And I love the almost meta component of it here, where it's not just the real world in the sense of there is a conspiracy, and there's basically an Illuminati made of vampires that are running like half of everything, and nobody realizes it. But also, you think the world is mundane and dull and like the world you and I feel like we live in, Austin, but the real world is actually comic books. They are absolutely saying that.
Mhm.
And as you get, and that's part of why the over the topness of it as it goes along is more and more credible, because we're peeling the curtain back and we're saying, kind of like the Matrix, but in a less literal way, this world is not realistic at all. But the characters, a lot of the characters inside of it think it is.
Yeah,
And
they're not seeing the real world as being the goofiness that it actually
And
is.
so weirdly, the goofier it gets, the more credible it is, because we're told early on the world is not what you think it is. Now, it maybe
Absolutely.
goes a little bit too far in the third act when you get to what feels like a mystical component almost with the blood god, because all the way through it, there's a pretty believable scientific explanation for everything. And then you get to that, and I'm like, I don't fully understand what I'm looking at.
Well, yeah, and I think
Because we've got a
'cause you asked me,
prophecy, and we've got an ancient godlike being that's literal blood that Blade almost fights.
no, and you asked me off camera how that worked, and I was thinking it would be really interesting, and this is something you could build off into sequels, and should have been what 3 did with Dracula. But you could have had something where it was vampires start from like a supernatural place, and then their society has moved so far that they've completely forgotten that, and it's become more of the science uh, type thing, where like they don't remember their roots anymore.
Yeah, maybe so.
And that could have been what you did with Dracula, but we didn't. So
But I like the idea, and I've seen this done in other things, obviously, but this does it better than most, partly because we have a set of rules that we stick to very, very closely. And again, it's just all credible. I guess that's the word of the night, right? But
yeah,
we use a lot of the standard like weaknesses for vampires, all of those tropes, and we say, here's why. For instance, vampires need to feed. It's because they don't have enough hemoglobin in their blood. And we say, here's why vampires are susceptible to garlic. It's because it makes the blood coagulate, or whatever the explanation is. Here's why things like crosses don't do anything to them, because there's no mystical angelic component to it. Holy water's not going to do anything because nothing is holy in this world. Or if it is, it doesn't affect vampires because, I mean, it's basically like the same thing that we've now done for most zombie stories in making them science fiction pieces. Right? Where, like, zombies aren't mystical much of the time anymore. It tends to be a virus. And in
it tends
this,
to be like a rabies type thing.
yeah, and in this, it's a condition that you can get, which kind of begs the question as to what you are after you're turned into a vampire, because it's not undead. And one of my big questions with this, and I mentioned this to you off camera also, Austin, is does the cure that Karen is working on for Blade, where he wouldn't have to feed anymore, but would take away his powers, would that work on the vampires? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I guess, well, that's a question, too, but there's also the thing she injects herself with that stops her turn, because she gets bitten at the beginning. And you have that ticking
She's
time
kinda working
bomb.
against the clock to not turn into one.
Yeah,
of
is she going to turn? I do think it's a little bit too easy, maybe, that Blade and Whistler keep her alive, because there's no reason they should think that she'll be okay after that, and it's a little convenient how long it takes.
No, that's very true.
It does kind of feel like he keeps her alive because she's attractive.
Although, is she? Because now that we're talking about this, I can't remember. Does she get some of Blade's serum? Like, are they doing anything to slow it down?
If they do that, I missed it.
That's why.
I
I'm
know
thinking about
she's
it, I'm like, I don't
experimenting
remember.
with it, so maybe, but I don't know if they explicitly come out and say that.
Yeah, that could be an explanation.
There is something about her slowing it down before she's fully cured it, so maybe that is what it is, and I missed it.
No, I mean, because you could have easily had it be like a more tragic end with her, and I like how we then do that with 2. I think that's pretty cool.
Which I haven't seen in a long time, so I don't remember exactly what's done with that. It is weird she doesn't come back.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like she's the type of like love interest character that it makes sense doesn't necessarily have to come back. And
Well, it's not about the love interest part, Austin. It's about how close she is to a cure for vampirism.
Oh no. In that sense, I agree. I just mean like as a character, like I think it makes sense that this character doesn't come back into.
Now, does the but that is kind of that superhero trope. Maybe it's better about it than something like Batman, but it does kind of feel like she doesn't come back because we're done with that character now, and we just want to move on to somebody else with Blade.
And I do wish she came back for 3, because 3 is all about getting rid of all the vampires through their like serum thing to inject with Dracula.
This kind of pseudo chase with the weird frame rate and the jumpy camera is, I think, about the most dated thing in the movie, or one of the most dated things in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
The vampire that is biting the woman in the alleyway is the director.
Oh, cool.
Who just looks like Sabretooth from the first X-Men movie.
Well, and I had to go back because I was like, was that Donald Logue?
No, it is not Donald Logue.
Looks like him.
He's much bigger than Donald Logue.
Oh, okay.
Donald Logue, for folks who don't know, of course, is like years and years later will play Harvey Bullock in Gotham. Mm-hmm. And he is much skinnier in this movie.
And he's in Ghost Rider.
And he's in Ghost Rider. I always forget about that.
Yep. I like with the world building in this movie that we do kind of like the houses from Krypton with the vampires. We have like their logos.
Yes. Yeah, it feels like a real lived-in world with this, again, very consistent mythology, where we set that up, and it's real mysterious and interesting. Like, we don't know what those symbols signify, and you kind of buy that anybody not in the know wouldn't even be thinking about those symbols. And then every time you see them, you know stuff's about to go down. And you get that again in the stinger at the end in Russia, where that's on the side of a Russian building. And you're like, oh man, I know what that means now. Blade explained it to me. I also think exposition is handled very deftly in this movie.
Yeah, we just got that scene where he's explaining the weaknesses, and it's done just real quick while they're walking into what's going to be the next action scene.
I think Christopherson is a master at exposition.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds cool.
You'll get that a little bit later.
Yeah, definitely. When he's probably the most controversial thing about these movies at this point,
just because of the retconned aspect of his death and how he's brought back in the second one, and then the way he's killed in 3, or
no, at the fact that Blade has a trainer guy that's like a black jazz singer in the comics.
Oh.
And so some people didn't really like that we took that and made it into like this kind of white cowboy guy.
Which is interesting because they were never looking at a black guy for that role.
Mm-hmm. No, because I don't think they were ever really thinking of adapting that character.
Yeah, like people compare him to that. I don't know that character from the comics because I haven't read that stuff. But people compare him to that character because Blade's got to have a mentor or a sidekick or somebody to pass his knowledge down to. And so that's the obvious direct comparison, but I don't think they're really looking at that.
They also want Blade to be a more quiet man. So you also want somebody that can deliver more exposition that's not just Blade.
Yeah, Jason was like, I feel like Blade's the kind of character that wouldn't have this guy to talk to, and I'm like, this is a dull movie if you don't have that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can kind of agree with what he's saying.
You do kind of need that. Now, maybe I'm partly saying that just because I think the dynamic is really good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's where some of the best levity comes from. Like, it's all real dry, but that bit where he hands Blade the ultraviolet light, and he's like, but you're so big. Like, it's hilarious.
No, they're a fun duo, I think. And that's why, while obviously in 2, like, it is built on a faulty premise, like I like what they do with Blade and Whistler in that movie. It's just we couldn't really figure out how to get there in a good way.
Well, and I mentioned this to you off camera too, Austin, but for the rest of the audience, if they hadn't cut another scene that was almost at the end of this movie. I don't think they shot it, but there was supposed to be a scene where they do a funeral for Whistler, and he was going to be burned on a pyre. And if they'd done that, they really would have had a hard time bringing him back. It was going to be like a Qui-Gon funeral.
Then it would just have to be Blade and his Powerpuff Girls sidekick.
Yeah, absolutely. Roboter says they used a white Whistler in Spider-Man TAS, which is bizarre. Austin, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, the Whistler thing in that is really weird because Whistler's created for this movie, but that show came first, but he's created in the development of that movie, and that's why he's in that show. It's really strange. I don't think I've ever seen a character like that before.
I can't think of another place where that is. Where that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most people would assume, looking back, that Whistler must have been a comic book character.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I mean, that's what I thought for, a long time when I was a kid.
Okay, is this Blade's mom in the scene, or is this a different...
No, this is Blade's mom.
Black vampire woman he keeps around? Because her face was on camera for so little time, I could not... And I was looking away, I could not tell.
No, and I think that's what's kind of cool about it is that they hope that you don't remember that that's Blade's mom, and she goes by so quick. So you already know that he's kind of got this woman with him, but I think it still works as a reveal that it's Blade's mom because you're not necessarily thinking about it. Like he just has a woman he slept with.
It's a really twisted reveal.
Mm-hmm.
Because at first, when you find that out, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but when you find out toward the end that that Blade's mom is still around as a vampire, and that she's been sleeping with Whistler and working, or not Whistler, sorry, sleep. That would be messed up. That would be more messed up with Frost, and that he's been keeping her around all this time. You're like, oh, dude, like he's been with Blade's mom. Like that's really messed up and icky. And then you realize, when you find out that he actually is the vampire that, if I'm understanding this right, that he's the vampire that made Blade a half vampire, you go, oh, in a weird way, he's his dad, too.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. I mean, he's the vampire dad, and in a sense, Whistler's the human dad, right?
Everything about that and Blade's tragic backstory is real Shakespearean.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I love that. And I love all the...
They're watching Mortal Kombat.
Okay, there you go. And I love it all the baked-in ironies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I like the familiar idea a lot. There's a part of me that wishes you had a grander sense of it, of just seeing more humans working as slaves for the vampires. We get the big token one that we just saw Frost get rid of here because he...
Well, it does
he kind of messed up Frost's plans a little bit, and so he's not going to get sired now. I'm sorry, what?
I said I do think it gives a little bit of personality to that lobby fight when you have that just Terminator shot where he's walking up with the shotgun, and the guy's like, "No, please, like I just work for them." So he's just a familiar. You get like a little bit of personality with it there, but I think it's fine for what's here, and it's like there's enough for it to be impactful, but you can also build on it more in a sequel.
Yeah, and I think they do that.
Not really.
Not really?
Not from what I remember. I do like that Blade can tell the difference, though, just by looking at them. We set that whole thing where like vampires move differently than humans.
Yeah, and I buy that.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And then we kind of ruin that in Blade 3, but we'll get there.
And again, we're just getting weirder and more comic booky as we go along. This has that thing that Buffy does where you'll have like really old, like more bizarre looking vampires.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted to reference, although I will say, the like person, in like a giant creepy fat suit that's like stuck in a place and can't move. I feel like after this movie, I've seen that in like 19 different things.
I feel like this is something that comes up a lot, yeah.
It comes up a lot. And this isn't the first thing to do it, but I feel like a lot of things after this have done that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first place, because I know like Doctor Who does that kind of thing quite a bit. And the first place I remember seeing something sort of like that is in, this is going to be an obscure reference for people, but in the 80s BBC Hitchhiker miniseries. There's I think a character like that in that show.
There's a thing like that in Clock Tower, and I'm trying to think. There's, because my mind's kind of blanking on it, but I've definitely seen a lot of characters like this.
And this is really visceral and disgusting, and I think in some ways one of the harder scenes to look at, just because it looks as good as it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fair.
Like, this movie gets a lot of props for its visual effect sequences, of course, but I think it's kind of underrated in makeup and practical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It needs more love for that, because it does a really good job blending those things as well as it could in 98. And again, it's really ambitious. So there's some effects that are just going to look like state of the art for the time. Just aren't going to look any better than they do for what they're trying to accomplish.
Especially because people bring up 2 a lot for that, but there's maybe an argument to be made that this movie has a better balance. Because there's,
I'm sorry, what did you reference?
Blade 2 gets a lot of credit for that, but there's maybe an argument that this movie has a better balance, because there's more just out-of-place CG that stands out to me in Blade 2.
Do you think they kept these... Do you think they kept these giant pieces of parchment around after the production? Do you think they auctioned these? Do you think anybody's got these?
I think the IRS does. Originally, Wesley Snipes did.
I knew you were going to joke about that somewhere, and that was perfectly placed. Well done, sir.
I actually wasn't, and then that was like the perfect place to throw it in.
It's mentioned in the commentary, and again, pardon me, because there's like 8 different people in that commentary, and none of them are the director. But somebody in that mentions that these pieces of parchment cost like $5 to make.
Yeah, it's not surprising. You can make stuff like that like easily at home. The kind of old paper look.
Dan Schneider is messing with us again. $2 super chat. He says this movie would have been better with Patton Oswalt.
Very true. That's why 3 is the best one.
No, get him out of my everything.
Hey, at least he doesn't make it in Blade Trinity. No, Blade, you just destroyed that $5 parchment.
Oh, I thought you were going to complain that he just kicked like an 11-year-old girl in the face.
No, I think more people should do that. Some of these henchmen look like the 89 henchmen. With like their beret hats.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you mentioned 89 because I wanted to say somewhere that Donald Logue's character is like Bob the Goon fully realized.
Absolutely.
And he was originally supposed to be that level of character. He didn't have a lot of lines in the script. He was more just kind of serviceable for the story, and they liked him so much on set that they let him do a ton of ad-libbing, so most of the crazy stuff he says was not on the page. It's all him. That thing at the end where he's like, I'm going to be a naughty god, that's all Donald Logue.
That makes sense. That is the type of character that is typically just nothing in a movie. But because they let him do that, he's almost like a RoboCop henchman. Like, the henchmen in RoboCop are all super memorable.
Yeah, and I was thinking The Crow with that also, which you've not seen. But they both kind of have that.
Well, there's so many things like that just kind of every action movie was looking at the time.
And specifically these like gritty rated R super stylized things with these just horrible henchmen that don't have any redeeming value, but it's believable because of who they are. So in something like RoboCop, it's because society is so far gone that we're like very quickly losing our humanity. And in this, it's because it's vampires that are ruling the world and or almost are, and can get away with being like this. I mean, he basically comes out at the end and is like, he doesn't straight up say this, but there's this kind of undercurrent of, I'm acting like this because no one's going to stop me. Like, I don't need morality. I can, like, we're going to be gods. I can do anything I want to. I'm naughty because I can be naughty. And you buy that somebody like that might be that way. I also like the just hilarious motif of his constantly losing an arm and having to grow it back. And
he's constantly getting injured. When I had like a real Mandela effect watching this, because I always remembered the ending in Russia being him killing Donald Logue, but he kills him in the climax.
Did you know that originally they talked real seriously about making it Whistler come back?
What, the end?
Yeah, the vampire he was going to fight at the end was going to be Whistler, and it was going to be like a big setup thing.
I didn't, but that's interesting because of the sequel they made.
It is. It means that they were already thinking he should, not be dead and be a vampire, but I don't know why they had him kill himself. Because it doesn't make sense that he could shoot himself in the head and then still come back as a vampire. That's the whole reason he shot himself.
No, absolutely.
Do you wonder if there are other Blades out there in this universe? Like, has this happened to anybody else where you're born like half vampire, half human?
Specifically Blade. So I thought you just meant like vampire hunters.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I meant like more half vampires like this, where you have all their powers but none of their weaknesses.
I mean, it's possible. I'm gonna say I think the world is a little less interesting if there are.
I agree. He is very much a Spock-like kind of character, right?
But I was gonna say Star Wars, where I think they've done everything they can to make that universe less interesting, where there's 8 billion Jedis hanging out at the same time as Luke.
Yeah.
Because part of what's cool about that original trilogy is he's the last hope. And Leia, but
Well, and the reason I bring up Spock is because and there's a lot of other characters with that archetype, right, where we tend to latch on to people who have one foot in humanity and one foot in something else because it speaks to otherworldness, people feeling apart and left out in other, right? And the duality thing, where we all feel that way at some point in our lives to some degree, where like you're an outsider and you kind of belong in one place and kind of another, which makes you feel like you don't belong in either place. And it's much more interesting if you're the only one with specifically the situation or the problem that you have. Or not problem, but condition that you have.
So just watching this now, I wonder if there's a version before they, fall in love with Donald Logue, if he dies in that scene. Because I feel like you could easily get rid of him there and not really lose much.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's a bunch of different places he could die, and of course, they make you think that he's gone in at least one place.
Yeah, exactly.
I was a little confused at the beginning, and maybe this is obvious and I just don't know what I'm talking about, Austin, but when Blade like sets him on fire and before that he says I'm tired of constantly whatever it is he says, like taking you to pieces or whatever. It makes it seem like he knows he's going to die and then somehow come back or something. I don't think that's what it is, but that's what it feels like in the moment, where it's like he looks like he's incinerating and Blade is like, give my regards to Frost. And I'm like, does this guy keep dying and coming back to life? Like, what is happening?
Well, I just like to imagine he's like the vampire Turk, where he's just like this annoying vampire he has to keep dealing with now.
I'm sorry, we can't get too far away from this part, Austin, because he just said that he is something else.
I am something else.
Jason looked at me and he was like, wait a minute, Dad, is this only the second theatrical Marvel movie after Howard the Duck? And I said, technically no, but it's the second one of any credibility, or that's not the right word, but like
of any note,
major motion picture, right? Like the other couple that were made in between this were official Marvel productions, right? But they were kind of made by like B movie houses. So you had Punisher with Dolph Lundgren, and you had Captain America. Those are both theatrically released, so they count.
Also Forgotten, so I mean, I guess no. How the Duck's not really forgotten because it's remembered as being awful, unfortunately.
And it was released by a major studio as a major motion picture.
And it was like the big follow-up to Star Wars for Lucasfilm.
The other two I wouldn't think were even really wide release movies. Like, they were in the theater, but how many houses showed them? Like, Howard the Duck would have gotten, like, Star Wars release. Because, I mean, that's Kathleen Kennedy, that's, yeah, that's a Lucasfilm movie.
Marty's mom.
Right. That's the very next thing she did, right? Because that's 86?
I would think so, yeah.
How do you feel about the minimal nature of Whistler and even Blade's really backstory?
I think it's good because it's, it's that Western thing where you give just enough, but you don't need to stop and be like, here's what he did when he was like 8.
What I like about Whistlers is that it feels like he's leaving a lot out and that it's even darker and sadder than it sounds.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
All he gives you is, I had a wife and 2 daughters, and the vampires tried to make me pick what order they died in, and then he looks at her, there's a beat, and he just moves on. You're like, it was way worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think what's left out of that tells you quite a bit. And I'm surprised to say I think we have everything we want right then. I think in subsequent movies, we could, maybe flesh that out and do more with it. And I don't know if we ever learn any more in the second one.
We do.
I know he has a daughter.
Yeah, that's the thing, is Jessica Biel's his daughter in 3.
So does it turn out that one of those people survived, or is it yet a different daughter? Is that what it is? It's been too long. I just don't remember.
That's why he didn't keep talking, because he was like, my daughter's Jessica Biel in Blade 3. It's really embarrassing.
Look, I have a daughter named Jessica Biel. That makes it okay for me to break the law.
That makes it okay for me to kill vampires.
Dave Adkins, the alternate ending to this movie gets way crazy ambitious with the blood CG. Yeah, it does, and all you have is the initial animatics before they fully realized it, so it's hard to say just how bad it would have looked.
Well, I think for me, the little that we do in this doesn't look very good, so, when I watch that, it's like, okay...
It still looks unfinished.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, they were really ambitious, and it maybe would have been better for the story, but they were smart in going, okay, this is what we can actually do.
Look what he did. He took my hand again. Austin...
I like that the girl's bandaging his arm and then he starts eating it.
Do you agree with this, Austin? I think What's that?
I said I do.
Oh, good. Thanks, man. Well, I don't even need to explain it now. I feel like this, just like Ninja Turtles, and again, remember, both released by New Line, walk a really interesting line between being big commercial movies. This one more so, because it's got more star power. It's got star power. It's got a bigger budget. It had probably a bigger advertising campaign. Initially, anyway. But anyway, both of them walk this really interesting line, though, between being super commercial and still being made kind of like independent movies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that was just New Line style back then. Because I know Robert Shea, the guy who ran New Line, he was not like a typical producer, from what I understand. Like, he was very... I don't know, he just kind of ran things his own way. So it has some of that indie energy. And I mean, he started off as a distributor that would have film reels of like pink flamingos in his car that he would drive around.
And so, of course, they're willing to take some kind of more wild risks on things than some other bigger studios would. But it's also important to note that they're still thinking about bankability and will look at trends, and so you don't want to think of New Line at this time as being just like an independent studio. After all, they initially asked Marvel if they could change Blade to be a white guy.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. So they were worried this wouldn't sell at that time.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I think there probably is some truth to whether they're looking at that other mentor character in the comics or not. Whistler is a white guy because they're concerned about, you know, a quota with that. And not to get too involved in that discussion, but I will say it's very interesting that Wesley Snipes in the commentary, and I'm sure this was for Laserdisc and around like 98, 99. The commentary, by the way, is handled exactly like Spawn's, where it's this like sliced up thing with a bunch of different people that worked on the movie that are not actually watching the movie, and it's just interviews with them put to the movie. And you know how I know? Because I watched some more of the behind the scenes, and one of them is Goyer saying verbatim with the obvious same recording, like 3 minutes of something he said in the commentary, and I'm like, oh, you cheated. You just took stuff out of his interview and you put it in the commentary. Like, I didn't realize that. But anyway, there's this part in the quote unquote commentary where Wesley Snipes says that he's kind of praising the movie for not making a big deal out of race and not making a big deal out of the fact that the star is black. But then he says that we keep calling her the love interest. Importantly, they don't actually really get together, but there's clear, sexual chemistry.
Just in terms of like formula, because I called her the love interest earlier, but it's more of like she's like the Bond girl. Like she's not necessarily a love interest, but like that's the role that she is.
Yeah, all the way to she has to get kidnapped at the end. Because again, the third act kind of degenerates into a typical superhero movie. But, and even for the time, the few that we had, because that still happens a lot. But anyway, there's like 6 other things I want to mention right now, and I really hope that I remember to get to them. But Wesley Snipes brings up that she is, he's kind of praising it for the fact that she's black, where it's like, we're not even worried about having too many black people in this movie. Remember, this is 1998. It's a different time. He's like, we're not even worried about having too many black people in this movie, and we think people will still see it, and that's cool. But then he's like, she wasn't written in the script as any particular ethnicity, and she's black because we don't want the audience to be thinking too much about the interracial thing. And so it's really weird the way he's... Yeah. The way he's praising it, and at the same time, it feels like,
where it's almost like, I appreciate it for doing this, but I also understand that they did it for maybe this negative reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a little weird listening to him talk about that. Mm-hmm. Okay, other Matrix things, sunglasses, obviously.
Yes. 100%.
And actually, now that I'm on with the race thing, let me say this real quick too.
I was gonna say I had something else to go off, something you said, but I don't remember what it was.
So Neo was almost a black
man.
Will Smith. He was almost Will Smith, and if that had happened, I think there's a chance that movie, I don't know how it would have affected the box office, but I never had this thought until I watched this again. Remember, this comes out the year before, and remember that it is successful. It's not Matrix successful, but it's like a $40 million budget. It does 130 at the box office. It had 2 sequels. People saw it. People liked it.
And they still talk about it to this day.
And they still, and it's
left an impact.
It's still well regarded, and we keep talking about influences that I'd never noticed before. So I don't think anybody could argue with me that it's a popular film. Right?
I mean, whenever
if the Matrix
say,
comes out,
characters coming back, Wesley Snipes is always one of the first ones. To the point where when we were talking about an MCU Blade, people were like, "Well, can it just be Wesley Snipes comes back?"
Yeah. So, making this point finally, in '99, when the Matrix comes out, if it's a black man in that part, at least some contingency of people look at it as a ripoff of Blade. And it also doesn't have that because it's Keanu Reeves. Sorry, what?
I said, I also, when you switch back to the Wesley Snipes thing, I remembered the point I had, which is, of course, it's Wesley Snipes in this because 90s Marvel's like obsessed with Wesley Snipes. Like we almost made a Black Panther movie with him.
Well, that's actually the reason he comes over to this, is because that's falling apart and he's really frustrated with it. So as soon as he's offered Blade, he jumps at it because Black Panther was not going to happen.
But also Tarantino was going to make Luke Cage, and he wanted Lawrence Fishburne, and people told him he should do Wesley Snipes instead.
And Lawrence Fishburne was on the short list of people New Line was considering for this.
Hmm. So I just have this thing in my head where I'm like, 90s Marvel just loves Wesley Snipes. He would have been. There's a universe where he's every Black Marvel character.
And also, it feels like there's this weird rotation, right? Where because Fishburne didn't end up in this movie, now he's in The Matrix.
Mhm. Yeah, what does the world look like if Keanu Reeves is Blade and Wesley Snipes is Neo?
I don't know. It's hard to say. So, another thing that I really appreciate about the way the rules are handled with this movie, or the lore, is there are various places. It's a relatively smart movie. There are various places where I'm asking questions, logical questions, and very quickly the movie answers them for me. So
Yeah.
it's not plot holes. It's not stuff the movie's not thinking about. There are a couple of, and I've asked them really already. I think there are a couple of questions I have that don't massively affect the story or the plot, but just things I'm curious about. It holds together pretty well. You have the scene that we talked over a couple scenes ago where Deacon Frost kills one of the 12 council guys. And Jason and I look at each other, because I haven't seen this movie in forever, and we both said, how come the other vampires aren't burning up in this scene, but this guy dies? And they know that you're wondering about that, and like they don't feel
Look at
the
the
need to
answer here.
they don't feel the need to explain everything to you right away. Like they're confident enough in their material and in their ability to tell this story, and they're confident enough that you are intrigued enough to keep going with them, and that by this point in the movie, they have credibility. I'll use that word again, and that
Well, the
you
sunscreen
trust that it will
thing-
make sense. And so it's like, how do they survive that? Oh, they're wearing some kind of sunblock.
No, the sunscreen thing doesn't make any sense, but in like a comic booky way where you go, oh, like that's fun.
Yeah,
Because-
but like I guess because I was asking it and they gave me an answer to it, I'm not even questioning the logic of that now. I'm just like, oh, good, you told me what it was. I appreciate that.
Well, because you just stop and think about it for like any amount of time, and you're like, okay, like you'd have to get in like every crevice, like
Yeah.
in your ears, and like when you open your mouth, can the sunlight go in and kill you? And like, how does it work with your eyes? But at the same time, like that's the type of thing we do in comics, and I think it's silly enough that it works.
Well, I thought it was leading to a different plan. Which is
Oh, okay.
when they kidnap the doctor, when they kidnap Karen,
Mhm.
he also had that's the scene I was telling you about off camera. When Frost moves his head and those bullets are coming at his head, that is Matrix-esque bullet time. And
Yeah, that's the one that I said.
oh, I thought you were talking about a different scene.
No, you were like, there's Matrix bullet time, and I was like, yeah, in this scene, and you were like, no.
That's not what you described, though.
Yeah, it was like when he shoots him at the park, and the bullets are like, whoosh.
Yeah, I thought you said something else.
Oh, okay. That's
It's
fine.
not important. But yeah, admittedly, I thought it was later in the movie. I forgot that's where it was. But yeah, I thought you said something other than bullets.
No, it's okay. How did you do that?
But yeah, so when she gets kidnapped, and they have that conversation in his apartment or whatever it is, I thought where all this was leading was we've been looking for some way the vampires to have all of our abilities but none of our weaknesses, and you can concoct something for us that will do that for us. That's where I thought it was all going.
Oh, okay.
And,
yeah.
I thought it was going to be like an evil genetic plot,
Well,
not.
you easily could have done that.
And I
with the
kind of
setup
wish
here.
that's what it was, to be brutally honest with you, because it loses me a little bit at the end when it all becomes the typical prophecy thing, and there's this thousands-year-old like blood god we're trying to get to bring back that will be a blood tornado, and everybody it touches will turn into a vampire.
Yeah, with the exception of the vampire thing, because it's weird and I don't exactly understand how that works. I do like the prophecy thing and like how it sets up. And I like the like cool blood thing where it like hits down on all the people around that are all the elders, and then goes into the person in the middle. Like I think all of that's cool.
And I like that they put Blade in a giant action figure case.
Yeah. And
That's got like foam that's perfectly contoured to his body, even though they can't possibly know what his dimensions are. Did you have that question? It's just like carbonite, where it's like,
no, it's like that sunblock thing where it's silly in the right way.
because it's great. Because at least carbonite, it's like, well, he doesn't have to fit in it. He gets like put down there, and then when he comes out, he looks like that. Like, I guess it's not like carbonite. Because with this, it's like,
it's like this thing. Well, I guess not really. But...
Well, I was thinking about it retroactively, where it's like once it comes
Yeah.
out, it's the prop itself is built that way, where it's perfectly built around the contours of his body.
No, and I'm convinced.
But it's liquid in the first place. I forgot
cut
that part for a
on,
second.
like-
I'm sorry, what?
So I have like a weird phobia about being cut, like right here, like on the wrist. And I'm convinced it's because of this movie where you have the shot where it closes and like the blades go into his wrists.
So he talks about that in the commentary,
Mhm.
and he says that he was terrified that was going to happen.
Mhm.
I'm convinced that when he cringes right before it closes, that's not acting.
Interesting.
But he claims that, like whenever they would pull the wrist straps, that like that cut into him and really hurt. So that might be what that was. But he says that when the thing closed on him, he really thought it was gonna hurt him, but he said it didn't touch him at all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's like the one thing that always makes me a little queasy. And I'm like 800% sure that I have that because of this movie.
You know what's amazing, Austin?
What's that?
He still doesn't get any blood on his hands.
It's because he's cool. Cool people don't get blood on them.
Like, he's gonna spend this whole conversation like wiping Whistler down, and he still gets no blood on him anywhere. It's
Well,
amazing.
It's been so long since I've seen Blade 2, but there's a whole thing where he like bathes in blood in the third act, and I'm pretty sure he comes out and he's not, super red. Like, I think it just like comes
I
up.
love that as a superpower. That like that's a thing that he also got from Frost biting his mother. Okay, so have you
skin
had
absorbs it.
have you had that thought?
What's that?
That is also Goyer ripping off Batman 89.
What?
That is the Joker killed Batman's parents.
Oh, no, because I think the Deacon Frost thing comes from the comics. I've heard.
Really? Like, is it the same thing though, where like Frost sires him?
Oh,
Or not
I don't
sires him, but you see what I'm saying?
I
It's
don't
like
know that
it's the Joker Batman like you made me, no I made you thing.
But I think some of that comes from the comics, though.
Okay, interesting.
But I could be wrong. But I'm pretty sure.
Well, and obviously there are lots of comic book characters that are created by their arch nemesis, but the reason I thought of the Joker in this is it feels really convenient to me that the lead guy that comes up with this take over the world plot with the blood tornado is also the guy that happened to turn Blade into a half vampire. That's a little
He stole
easy.
my blood tornado.
Why didn't anybody tell me it was the half vampire?
He has one of those swords.
Which is, by the way, in vampire lore and outside of this, called a Dhampir, Dhampir, a daywalker. So if you're a half vampire, if you're not affected by some of the vampire weaknesses, but you have their powers, you are a Dhampir.
Oh, okay.
I had never heard that before. I'm not sure where that comes from.
I'm not sure either, because Dracula can walk out in the sun, I'm pretty sure. It depends on what version. But, like, vampire weaknesses, there's like 8 billion of them, and we always pick and choose. But there's some versions of Dracula that can walk out into the sun.
It's apparently an Albanian word that is that's a variation on vampire.
Well, and vampires are one of those things where like every place in the world has their own version on it.
And the only popular iteration of that I can find is, in fact, Blade, which makes me think that maybe the comics use it, because it never comes up here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dan Schneider just said Blade's origin is the same in the comics. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I thought it was slightly different, But
I mean,
I
it
do
is
know
to
that
an
his
extent.
power set's different.
Yeah,
Initially.
well, Blade was born in 1920 in the comics.
Yeah. Now does
Like,
he?
there is changes.
Now in the comics, does he age differently?
I mean, I assume so
Because
because
in
he's
this,
that
we're told
old.
that he ages like a regular human, so he has that quote unquote weakness, and that's one of the things that I think is a big missed opportunity. And I'm surprised I'm saying this. I guess I'm just saying this because these first two movies are good, and if you got the right person on it, you could potentially make a cool decades later sequel out of it. And I would rather that than at least at the moment see MCU even attempt it. What's cool about the idea of doing a Wesley Snipes Blade sequel now, which won't happen, is you don't even have to do any de-aging stuff or try to make him look the age he was here because he doesn't age. He ages like a regular person, so he would look the same now as the actor does.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of cool. You never get to do that with vampire characters. They always age slower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be interesting to see what you do with that because they wipe out all the vampires at the end of 3.
Oh, I forgot about them. And that's really interesting too because one of the many endings that they wrote for this movie, they really struggled with the ending. And honestly, I think you can kind of tell. It's not terrible, but they really struggled with it. Tell me what you think of this, because there's a part of me that, even though I like Blade 2, would have liked to have seen what they would do with this in a sequel. They
want
weren't
the Morbius ending.
They were not that. They weren't super worried about a sequel, of course. They were just making this movie, and they weren't even expecting it to do huge guns. They didn't know if they'd get to make another one. But of course they knew
They did a lot of that kind of sequel baiting.
they knew they'd be stuck with this huge ending if they got to make a sequel, and I don't know if that has anything to do with why they didn't do it, but they were going to have Frost obviously still get beaten by Blade, but the blood tornado go through a few blocks, so you would have ended up with a partial vampire apocalypse that you'd then have to deal with in a sequel.
Oh, that would have been interesting.
They almost did that.
That would have been a cool game, like a game follow-up where it's like this small portion of this town has become Arkham Vampire City. Now you're locked in it.
It would have basically been... Yeah, that would be awesome. And apparently the couple of Blade games they made are terrible. I've never looked at them.
They should make a Blade game now. There's
They
a lot of
should.
possibility there. Yeah.
Well, and maybe they could get Wesley Snipes to come back and voice it.
Possibly.
That would be really cool if they did a thing specifically in this continuity, or based on this continuity. But anyway, if they had done that, you know what it would have been like? It would have been like the Narrows at the end of Batman Begins, which you always complain about how we never deal with that in sequels.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Dan Schneider, why won't Wesley Snipes be able to do it again? Because MCU is making a Blade movie? So,
And
I mean,
he's like the one person that's off the table for Deadpool 3.
That's what I was going to say is I don't think he would come back for just a cameo.
Well, I just mean because Ryan Reynolds worked on Blade Trinity and had like an awful time with Wesley Snipes.
Oh,
and I
that's
also
a good
think there's bad blood between him and Halle Berry. So if they bring her back,
I see what you did there.
what?
Bad blood.
Ah, that was intentional. So this is the sequence that's the weird love child between the Matrix lobby scene and the T2 lobby scene.
Yeah, talk about that.
And there are two scenes that I've never thought to compare, but it's like this weird middle ground where it's like the transition from one to the other. Where like all this water coming down reminds me a lot of T2. And obviously you have like the henchman thing and you have like the pillars here and he's going to have a shootout with them. But it also reminds me a lot of when the Terminator comes out and he's not shooting up the police.
That's my favorite Frost moment. When they're geeking out about how Blade does fight sequences, and then he says, "Shut the F up." It's so good.
There's some really funny F-bombs in this.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
My favorite line is when favorite Blade joke is when the cop shoots at him and he turns around and he's like, "Are you effing crazy?" or whatever.
Yeah.
Or he's like, "You're out of your effing mind."
And in 98, it felt pretty excessive with the F-bombs, but I think they're well placed, a lot of them.
Yeah, I don't think it's excessive at all. You could make an argument for Blade Trinity being excessively vulgar, but I don't think this one is.
You know what? I'm gonna rescind something I said
That's
earlier.
the most Terminator shot is when he walks up and he's holding the shotgun.
Well, and also just coming in on a motorcycle. But I'm gonna rescind something that I said earlier about the familiars. I missed that bit where that guy says I just work for them and Blade kills him. That's another familiar that he kills.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's the only one we see him kill, because the other one is killed by Frost.
Well, when you said that, that's the one that I mentioned.
Where, I missed that. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Where Blade's gonna shoot him, and the guy's like, "No, I just work for them." And
I think I missed that because I didn't remember that scene, and I just saw it like for the first time.
Yeah, no, you're good. And this guy exploding is straight out of Big Trouble in Little China. It's awesome.
Which I've never seen. But that's another thing that's kind of like the Matrix, where you've got human beings that you have to, ignore the fact that they're human and just kill because they work for the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
And also, in that speech that he gives to Karen, I meant to put all of this in the same section, but I'm spreading it out now. Also in that scene with Karen where he's explaining how the world works, he gives her the sense that the bad guys, the vampires who were basically the agents, like in the Matrix in this universe, are nigh unkillable, at least for regular human beings. Like, they're not for him. But she talks about it almost like Morpheus with Neo. Like, if you see one run, he basically says.
Mm-hmm. No, he's able to fight them because he has their power.
Because he's the one.
Well, now he's in the White Room from the Matrix 2.
Yeah, exactly. And does that make his mom the architect?
It does. She's the architect of him, literally.
Or does that make his mom the Middle Eastern guy from the beginning of 3?
I don't.
In the train
don't know,
station.
I haven't watched them.
I can't remember his name now, but that's another program. In a big white room. This certainly is
Dumbledore from the last Harry Potter in the White Void.
This certainly is a square white room. I'm glad you said that, because see, this movie is everything you've ever seen. Blade also,
but at least with Man of Steel, like, that's also Goyer.
Yeah, that's true. But a lot of the things we're mentioning don't have anybody working on them that worked on this.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. So if we reboot Blade, which we are, Blade's mom's probably the main villain that time, right?
I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe we intelligently get away from all of this stuff?
Perhaps, yeah.
Well, I say that. I mean, I guess you still have to have... You'd probably have something more or less the same backstory, but I don't know if, like, his mom will turn out to still be a vampire, or if they'll do any of that. Mm-hmm. None of that's a given, I don't think. But real quick, I was just going to say, in a weird way, he's got... This is maybe a stretch, but I thought of this while I was watching it, so I'll mention it. Blade has, like, a little bit, oddly, of, like, a Harry Potter thing. where like Deacon Frost is Voldemort, because it's like, you survived the thing I did to you as a baby, and I've been trying to kill you all this time.
You're the boy who turned.
Yeah, it's not 1-to-1, but it reminded me of it.
Harry Potter also has that secret society thing. Maybe J.K. Rowling just really likes Blade. Harry Potter.
To be fair, her first book came out before this.
To play Quidditch upstream.
I'm pretty sure her first book was like 97, though.
Yeah, I think it is.
We should do that, though. We should try to be obnoxious internet trolls and spread the rumor.
Oh, I mean, I love saying that things that came out before are influenced things that came later.
You know what? I
love doing that.
I meant to look up this composer, who only has, by the way, half an hour total of music in this movie, because so much of it is a like popular movie or music kind of soundtrack. the
Yeah.
songs in and inspired by. I didn't listen to that in preparation for this. I've never tried to listen to that album. I don't know if it's any good, but
It's got a really understated soundtrack.
you think so?
I think so.
Some people in the comments were saying it's the thing that most dates it, and that's probably true, but that doesn't make the music
Oh,
bad.
sorry. I meant score.
You meant score?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, are you like really into all the techno and stuff
Not really.
that's in this movie?
It's just kind of. I like that they play CCR earlier when they introduce Whistler.
Apparently I missed a super chat from Dan Schneider. I'll go back up in a second. But I was just gonna say,
Oh, yeah.
I meant to look up this composer, and I don't think it's the same person that did Ninja Turtles, but it's suspicious that it's two New Line movies, and the villain theme for this is that doesn't come up constantly, but like, I don't even know if it's supposed to be Frost's theme or if it's just the theme of mysticism. But when we get into this scene, and we heard it earlier, I think maybe around the scrolls or something, the parchment. It's the Shredder theme.
Oh yeah.
It's the same 3-note progression. And yeah, it's just 3 notes, but like it sounds a lot, and it's the same instrumentation. It's the don don don, like the Foot Clan theme. It's the same thing.
Huh.
Isn't that weird?
That is weird. Deacon Frost united all of the vampires that were turned like they're kids in an arcade.
He's like, go play, have fun, or I'm gonna eat you.
We're like your effing family, guys.
It would have been really funny if they did a double beat with that plot, and all the familiars. That would be messed up if all the familiars were just kids.
I actually had like a thought with that. Rewatching it earlier today, when they walk into the club and the people performing are like young, I think like Japanese girls.
Yes.
In like schoolgirl outfits.
Yes.
And I was like, you could take that really far and make that really creepy.
I mean, yeah, and of course it already is.
No, it already is. That's what I mean. Is
they
like,
intentionally make
like
it
a little bit there that you could make it way worse.
They intentionally make it ambiguous, by the way, as to whether or not the Japanese businessmen are vampires. Like, you don't know.
No, but you could do like a Blade version of like the Slavers, just off of that as a concept.
Dan Schneider, $2 super chat, says also Val Kilmer was almost Morpheus. I've never heard that.
That would have been strange.
If that's true, yeah, that would be weird. But yeah, I'm surprised by how involved Austin I get with and kind of by like all the chemistry in this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literal scientific chemistry.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant the cast, because I was like, yeah, there's not really a weak link.
No, there's not. But, like, first of all, I buy this woman okay as a scientist, or as a doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not like the Jessica Alba thing.
No, and I'll go as far as to say she would have been a pretty convincing Wanda in a Spawn movie.
Sure, yeah. And this woman could have been Emma Frost.
Sure. But yeah, I like her for Wanda.
No, I think she would have been a good Wanda. Wesley Snipes could have been a good Spawn, too.
Yeah,
and Donald Logue could have been a good the guy Spawn turns into.
No!
Donald Logue looks up, he's like, I'm white!
That's hilarious. Who could Donald Logue
like
have
that.
played? Donald Logue would have been a really amusing Tony Twist.
Yeah.
That would have been good. Or an overt kill. Donald Logue is overt kill.
Donald Logue's head shoots off at Wesley Snipes.
What do you think of the payoff here with the guy from the beginning that is turned into like a vampire zombie? It's like,
I think it's cool because
do you ever think about us still?
That I don't remember that this character exists, and then he does, and I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, and they take full advantage.
Like a pit.
They take full advantage of the fact that we've forgotten that, because you're not confused as to who that is. You go back to it, you remember it.
No, but it's one of those things where it would have been really easy to forget that this character existed, and it's like, oh, cool, you didn't.
Yeah, they do that in the best possible way, and with a couple of other things too, where like they're banking on things they think you've probably forgotten, and then they surprise you with them later. In the commentary, I think one of the writers talks about this kind of rule of threes that he has. That I thought was good advice as a writer, where he's like, what I like to do is set up a thing, particularly with the weapons, where you see it the first time and how it functions, and then later on you see it do another thing, and then we have a big important story payoff for it later. And it's...
Yeah, we just had that with the sword.
It's more effective because you keep seeing it, and so you maybe forget about it, but we keep touching back into it, and so it's a little more sophisticated than just setup and payoff, where it's a constant building. And so yeah, we do that with the sword, and we do it with the exploding like chemical things that she puts together that make the vampires blow up.
Like with the sword, you have
The syringes. I couldn't think of syringe.
You have the shot where she's kind of messing with his stuff, and it's like, oh, look, he's got this cool sword. And then obviously you get the payoff where it makes the guy's hand explode. But then it turns into like the exploding pen scene from Goldeneye, where Deacon Frost has it, and you're a little bit on edge because you're like, oh, is it going to go off? Like,
yeah.
Is he going to hold it long enough for it to do that? But then that also gets like a fourth one, really, because he's going to use that to free the chemical.
Yep. And he talks about that in the commentary, that one actually has four.
Mm-hmm.
Can we get an action figure of this?
That director should never direct anything post like 2008.
I think we need a. I think we need this literally as an action figure, where it's like foam that it comes in, but you're not supposed to throw the foam away because it's actually a prop. It's part of the figure. It's an accessory.
Well, I just imagine like what that would be called, because it would be like Blade's concrete prison set.
And it comes with the other. It comes with the other side, so you can sandwich them together. Okay, how do you feel?
Part of that line, those old action figures that came with like an issue of comics.
Yeah.
Except instead of that, it would just come with Blade 1, the movie.
Yeah, exactly. That's the required reading.
The required reading.
How do you feel? I don't know. What's the word I'm looking for?
Are you talking about his mom?
Ethically or not metaphysically. I don't know what word I'm looking for, but how do you feel about just the kind of morality of this, where we're playing it kind of like
they have sexual tension?
No. We're playing it kind of like... Sorry, just let me get through the thought. We're playing it kind of like she has died and been replaced with a soulless vampire. And so when Blade kills her at the end, it's difficult, but she even has a line in that scene where she's like, your mother died a long time ago. They're not really soulless. Mm-hmm. Or we don't really discuss that. It's not the Joss Whedon thing of like, just definitively vampires do not have souls. They're not the same people. There's not a mystical component to the way the vampires themselves work.
But I think it's just like a corruption.
It's a condition. And so, I don't know. I like the ethical ambiguity of it, but I almost wish she didn't have that line. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like it's kind of easy for the audience to sort of forget about the fact that the vampires are not necessarily soulless. If you've ever dealt with vampire stuff before, it is way more ambiguous than that when he kills his own mom. Because he's actually physically killing his mother. He's not just killing, like, the soulless husk of her. And that's why I'm wondering if you can cure actual vampires with the concoction that Cameron comes up with.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily like she's, literally not the same person. I think it's just that, like a kind of, not exactly sellout thing, but like she's been corrupted into this lifestyle and she's not the same person that she used to be.
I kind of wish I knew a little bit more about how all that happened.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm not sure why she's gone along with him all this time.
Hmm.
Like, I want to know what it does to you psychologically. Mm-hmm. That's what I was looking for, existentially. Existentially, I don't fully understand that.
Yeah, no, for sure. The thing I like about how they play his mom...
Senior Six says his mother did die. Okay, but it's still, yeah. So the way vampirism works in this is you die and then you're brought back to life, but you're not soulless. Like, you basically have, this is how I read it. Tell me if you agree with this. You basically have a like condition and ailment that brought you back from the dead, but like, are you undead now?
I mean, I would say technically, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little ambiguous, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the big thing that I like about how they play the mom is that she's just really creepy in how she acts around Blade, with his like a sexual tension with them, and just like real perverse.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's real creepy.
Well, and if she sees herself as no longer his mother, then you can see why she's messing with his head like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't get the sense that there's any part of her that's that feels bad about this or anything.
No, she's pretty much just a straight monster in that way.
Another difference in the ending that they had in mind, and I think I actually kind of like this, Austin, and wish they'd done it, is she was supposed to survive a little bit longer, and Blade was going to stab through her to get to Frost.
Oh, okay.
And like that was going to be really hard for him, and so he was going to be like, and I think there was a line, something along the lines of, from Frost, "You're too human to kill your own mother," and he's like, "No, this is what makes me human," and he stabs through her to get to him. It would have been a more thematically relevant ending, because one of my other complaints about this third act is I think it needs more aftermath. The one scene on the roof is not enough for me. I need to decompress a little bit along with Blade and get a sense of... I don't need the movie to come out and spell out a moral lesson or anything, but I want to know what he's taken from all of this beyond, yeah, I need to keep, fighting the good fight and taking it to the vampires. I'm not sure what exactly he's learned about his own humanity or lack thereof here. I like that he's still wrestling with it. I like that he's not figured everything out. And I really like that he hasn't gotten the full-on cure for his bloodlust yet. Like, all of that is really good. It makes it feel more comic booky because it's like, you got to get the next issue next month. Like, I like all that.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. When he's lost, his kind of one connection to humanity, and he's not going to Goy or Superman it and become evil now.
But I still don't see how he's any worse in how he handles all of this than he would have been if Whistler hadn't died.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the whole Roots thing is lost on me.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what he was getting at with that flower thing.
It seems a little bit... I can't even say it's on the nose because I don't understand it. It just feels like this real forced metaphor that I'm not even really appreciating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll have to find that interview or that part in the commentary.
And people in the comments are saying Donald Logue would have been good for Clown too. So what we're learning is Donald Logue should have been a Spawn in a Spawn movie as anybody.
I still prefer him as White Spawn, but Clown would have been good.
Yeah, the White Spawn thing doesn't make any sense at all.
No, but he looks like that guy.
No, he doesn't. That guy was like a CW pretty boy kind of guy. Like,
yeah, he just needs to shave, and then he'll be that guy.
Okay, I don't know what Austin's on about here, because that guy will later on turn out to be a real character who becomes Spawn for like 100-something issues.
Well, yeah, but you're not gonna do that in just a movie.
No, I know. I'm just saying. I've spent a lot of time with what that guy looks like, and he doesn't look like Donald Logue.
Nah, it works.
You are wrong,
Trust
sir.
me, it works.
Roboter says sexuality is usually attached to most vampire lore, and yeah, that's the main reason they did that with her, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they've got Frost being like weirdly sexual with that council guy.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's just a lot of sexual things. I mean, the first thing that we see is, a vampire woman taking a guy into this club where everyone's like half naked, dancing in blood.
Which is interesting because vampirism is not romanticized in this the way it is in a lot of other things. So
No, they make it kind of gross. Like a
they
lot
still
of
have
it's
that sexual
sleazy.
component, but yeah, but it's real animal-like.
Yeah, it's very sleazy and animal-like.
And like they're all kind of, posh and proper on the surface because they're like the white-collar elite of the society.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is the gross stuff they do underneath all of that nobody's supposed to know about. That by 2023 they'll all get Me Too'd over.
So we're about to get the Raiders of the Lost Ark thing.
They won't, because there's no vampires anymore. They got what they deserved. They got what they had coming to them.
Except if you open the Ark and you actually gain powers, because you're gonna have like all the spirits flying around that enter into them.
Oh yeah.
It's very Raiders of the Lost Ark.
There's that music sting again. That's just the Shredder theme. Just a little faster.
Well, because they are a family. Although the music changed immediately when we went to them.
Ooh, and I like it on the piano there.
It does sound good.
This isn't a like brilliant score or anything, partly just because there's not enough music. But what's there is pretty decent.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of really nice motifs. How do you feel about the CG in this scene? Like, how well does this stuff hold up?
It's a little wonky, but it's not awful.
It's not Spawn bad.
No. Very few things are.
Again, really ambitious and inventive for the time. I mean, you've got skeleton bats basically coming out of people and ripping their flesh apart. That's hard to do no matter what time you're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it looks better than some of the blood stuff in a bit.
But yeah, I will say the movie starts to lose me a little bit during this section.
Oh, okay.
Where like it's,
yeah, I don't really have that.
It's fun. It's visually interesting. I'm not with Blade as well as I was earlier in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't just mean that he's not on screen enough. I'm just saying like,
just not entirely sure about his character.
I'm just not appreciating and with the arc the way I was earlier in the movie.
Staked her through the stomach. How did that work?
I think the first hour is much stronger in characterization.
See, and I think I would compare this to like maybe like Iron Man, where it's definitely degenerating in the third act, but I don't know. Like I'm still enjoying it well enough that I don't really care.
But I can track Tony Stark's arc through the whole thing. When you get to the end of this, I'm not fully understanding what he's taken from all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
Like he's lost his best friend. He's still he's not going to be able to keep on his crusade without still having to deal with the bloodlust. And like he wins, he beats the bad guy, but like other than that, he's kind of right back to square one.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like he's got like a little bit of that like refusal to change, right? Like it's.
I can't decide if that's what it is or not. That's really what I'm getting at. Yeah.
No, I think that's what it is. It's that he could easily give into the bloodlust, and he's not going to.
See, this is why I shouldn't listen to anybody that made the movie talk about the movie before I review it.
And he just ripped a man's throat out and then threw the throat into a guy's face. This is awesome, Kev. I will not hear slander towards this.
No, there's... Well, and I'm just talking about story-wise.
I know.
There's some amazing choreography at the end here, and the swordplay is amazing. What's really cool is that they have to go back and reshoot all that after they spend an insane amount of money trying to make the Blood God thing work, and it all looks really good.
Yeah, there's another version of this movie where it ends up being like Masters of the Universe.
I had that thought, yeah. It's not phoned in.
Yeah. But they couldn't even afford to keep the lights on.
No, they had some bad test screenings. And they went, oh, as soon as Frost turns into the big blood god, we lose everybody because they were so into that character. They want to see Blade have to fight him. They want to see that confrontation. And honestly, after hearing them talk about that, I then watched that sequence. What they had with it, because they never finished it, and I was surprised that Frost's face was still in there some.
No, it is. It's just very wonky looking.
Yeah, it really is.
That like kick thing where they're like kicking back and forth, that reminds me of that Revenge of the Sith scene when Obi-Wan and Anakin are just flipping their lightsabers at nothing for like 30 seconds. And we should mention while we're watching all this kung fu stuff that this guy almost made a Shang-Chi movie.
Yes.
And it's such a shame he didn't, because it would have looked like this.
No, I agree.
It would have been, an actual kung fu movie.
Blade is so theatrical. He doesn't care that there's, at least in his universe, no cameras on him when he's doing all these amazing poses. I mean, he's like the end of Star Trek VI, but all over his movie. He just keeps posing for pictures that nobody's taking.
Well, it's part of his power set. That's how he gains back his power.
Oh, is that what it is? Well, I think that combined with the sunglasses.
Exactly.
Because he has to put those on before he goes to town on anybody.
Well, and both this and the second movie have like big, awesome shots where they get thrown up in the air and he catches them and puts them back on.
Bob the Hun, if they had good enough CGI, would the Blood God scene be any good? Actually, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was potentially really cool. It's just, it was a little too
They talk about it in the
time.
commentary like it was ultimately really lame and they're glad they didn't do it. And I think it's somewhere in the middle, actually. Because the image of Blade having to literally fight blood, where all of this, of course, is about bloodlust, but also about where his, I don't want to say loyalties lie, but like, what side he more lands on. Like, is he a vampire? Is he a human? And literally, like, does he have any actual humanity, or is he cold like the vampires? There's a clear, interesting image with him having to literally fight vampire blood
Well,
that I like.
I also think that it ends up, what we have here ends up falling into a little bit of a trope where he's going to become all powerful, but he's kind of just him. He's got like a few extra powers, but he doesn't seem as powerful as he's supposed to be. They can't
fully communicate what the way they talk about it on the commentary, which sounds a little bit, and by they I mean several people that worked on this movie. Again, a writer and I think the cinematographer and a few other people. But they talk about it retroactively, almost like they decided what it was after they shot it.
But I feel like that's something that Goyer learned from, because he's not going to try to go as big as this again, and we'll understand that the movie should probably just end with kung fu fights.
Because, like, as I'm watching it, I don't know if the Blood God has taken him over, or if he's just being kind of powered by it, or, like, I don't know exactly what's happening.
Yeah, I think he's just got, like, the power.
Right in the forehead.
He has the power.
That was a good shot. Oh, I never noticed that Deacon Frost looks right into the camera before he explodes. That's amazing. And that looks better than it has any right to. Like right before it explodes. I can't tell how much of that is effect, because when it real close up on it. Well, no, I think some of it actually kind of looks practical. I don't know if any of it is, but some of it kind of looks like maybe they built it on him.
I don't know. I don't think so.
You don't think it does?
I think part of it, and it's, again, because I've seen this and you haven't, I've seen them do that practically in Big Trouble in Little China, so like I'm more hyper aware of it.
Yeah, maybe so. There's just one close-up shot where I'm like, are there pieces of that are real? Like, I don't know. But yeah, like I said, I just feel like we need a little bit more aftermath here, and we need him to...
We're definitely going into like a more...
decompress.
Older school, like, okay, the plot's done.
So we're gonna get out now. Yeah. And I appreciate getting in and out to some degree, but this is a movie that has breathed more than this. It's not a short movie.
No, it's like just a few seconds over 2 hours on the dot.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't mind this as an ending. Like, I think you could have gone farther with it, but I don't know. I don't hate this. I love the Russia ending. The Russia ending is, or I guess epilogue is really cool.
Well, and it's the most like off a comic page looking thing.
Yeah. No, it looks beautiful. And once again, it's snowing everywhere, and Blade's gonna walk out, and he's got not a drop of snow on.
Yeah, nothing on him.
And you'd think it would really stand out because he's wearing all black.
But, you know, dealing with the dichotomy of Blade and, like, you know, is he a compassionate human being or is he a straight-up vampire trying not to be them and all of that, I like the idea that on the one end, he could cure himself and be fully human, and on the other end, he's got the potential to live with the bloodlust forever and like have that overtake him. Again, kind of Shakespearean, but it's neat that that's like physically represented by two choices he has to make, or by that one big choice he has to make.
Yeah, definitely. No, I also like with this that it's giving you even more world building of just this isn't an American thing; they're everywhere.
Yeah, well, a line I missed, before that I noticed this time, Austin, is, and this might be the excuse for why that character, why Karen's not in the second movie, because I don't remember where that takes place, but they're traveling. They don't live in LA.
No,
I didn't remember that. They keep like setting up shop in different cities.
I don't remember because it's been a while, but I'm pretty sure 2 does not take place in America.
Oh, even in America?
I don't think so, or at least maybe we go to America, but like we're shooting in Prague earlier.
Well, I remember he has the coolest lair in that movie, and it's not this place; it's a different place. But that's also kind of a neat conceit, right? So that you can have effectively a different Batcave every movie and have a good reason for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, that's pretty cool.
No, and we're gonna get the like Nosferatu vampire lord guy in too, and he's got like his big Del Toro library looking place.
Well, and you know, I'm surprised that you didn't mention that Abraham is supposed to be like modern Van Helsing.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And that's why he's named Abraham.
No, absolutely.
I'm not a big Dracula or Van Helsing guy, but I did research and I learned that.
I used to have the like, it was called like the Van Helsing's Guide to Monsters or something book when I was a kid. It was like, here's all the real monsters to look out for. It was super cool.
Hey, I want to apologize to the patrons because I just realized I didn't do a call for Patreon reviews this time.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'll make sure not to forget it next time, but
Rascal.
But obviously feel free to put them in the comments, anybody that wants to, but patrons, I'll make sure and read any that people might have next time, even though we will have already reviewed this. Like my apologies for that, and I'll try not to forget it for the next one we do. But yeah, I just realized I didn't do that this time. I totally spaced that.
Oh well, what can you do?
But be sure to subscribe to Patreon, everybody.
Where you'll be ignored.
Tomorrow night, Dark Knight Rises, 9:00 Central.
And we're gonna mute all of you.
You'll get real bang for your buck.
You're nothing but slaves to us. Oh, Wesley Snipes had his own chef credited.
Wow.
I don't know if I've ever seen that before.
Well, he apparently had like a whole entourage and everything.
When he like never left his trailer when he did the third movie.
Wow. But it's
like a whole thing with that.
But it's undeniable how much he brings to this.
Oh
like,
yeah, he's
this
so good.
Lives or dies by that performance.
Absolutely.
And he just finds that perfect balance between like cheeseball action hero and really tortured, conflicted character full of pathos. Like there's a lot of like real sadness and vulnerability in that
When
performance. You gotta have that.
with the whole issues with 3, like he was a real a-hole to everybody, but part of the reason that he was he didn't like what they were doing, and what they were doing was trash. So
So
he's also not wrong.
so that's fair, yeah. Well, and there's stuff in this that he didn't really want to do, and some stuff that he refused to do, and that they changed. Also, a number of things that were his idea that weren't initially on the page that I learned from the commentary, like the choice to have that secret entrance be in the freezer in that scene. That was him.
Oh, okay.
He thought of that during like a setup or a rehearsal, and I guess they built that into that because he said that.
Oh, that's really cool. And I was still like, I'm pretty sure everybody.
He was like,
knows
"Wouldn't that
at
be
this point.
funny? Wouldn't that be ridiculous?" And then, so he had a really authentic look on his face because he when he came up with that, he was like, "That is so ridiculous. I could just imagine how stupid that would be." And so that's one of my favorite moments from him in the movie when he gives that kind of cartoonish, like, "What? you idiot! I don't believe you." It's very funny. The many faces of Wesley Snipes.
Yeah, and obviously I think everybody knows at this point, but the famous ice skate line was like a thing he said at a meeting that Goyer added to the movie, and then he was like, "Hey, this doesn't even make sense in context." And Goyer was
I had
like, "Ah,
always
just say it
heard
anyways."
that wrong and was really surprised when that got brought up in the commentary, because Goyer talks about it there. And I in an interview that they pretended like was part of a commentary.
Oh yeah, my movie just ended, and it was like, "Do you want to watch the commentary with this person, this person, this person, this person, this person?"
It's like 8 people
Yeah, there's a lot of people in there.
that they just edited together. But anyway, I had always heard that wrong. I'd always heard that as Wesley Snipes insisted on that line, and it didn't make any sense, but they threw it in there anyway. And no, he didn't want it. It was a thing that he brought up in a meeting where he described Deacon Frost, and I still don't even fully understand this, but he described Deacon Frost as a character that is always, quote-unquote, ice skating uphill. And
Well, I always thought it was just like a thing that he says normally.
No,
and he just like said it. But he said it about Deacon Frost?
They claim he said it specifically about Deacon Frost.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, okay, I think there's actually a place to put that line that would make sense, but it wouldn't be from Blade. I think if Deacon Frost said it about Blade, it actually makes sense.
Yeah, but then it wouldn't be as cool.
No, it absolutely wouldn't. But that as a metaphor never made any sense to me. Okay, unless the idea is... No, I still don't get it. Like, if Frost said it about Blade, because he has the typical, like... Again, third act, a lot of superhero tropes. He's got the Green Goblin thing. He's got the you should join me
yeah,
thing.
And he even says the spat in my face thing. Like, it's almost the same phrasing.
Yeah. The only thing it's really missing at the end is the sadistic choice. But he says, you should... He basically has, like, the whole join me or die thing. And Blade is, in his mind, insisting on doing everything the hard way. He could have said, I escape uphill. That's basically what that means. Doing everything the hard way. It doesn't make sense the other way.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, and rewatching it this time, I was like, oh, my memory of this is a little wrong, because I always remembered it as he gets god powers and then Blade sees him and then he says it. He at least says it when he kills him.
Yeah.
It's at least a little better than what I thought it was.
Like, I could even almost see, and again, just the idea, obviously it wouldn't be cool coming from anybody else, but like, from the council guys, where it's like, because we didn't really talk about the politics of it, which are interesting, but you've got the council of vampires that wants to maintain the status quo and keep living as a secret society and just run everything from the background. And Deacon Frost wants the vampires to fully take over and to turn all the humans into vampires. And then they don't say it in the movie, but also have some humans around so that they can, live. But it's so weird they cut that out. But like, in that way, he's also like insisting on doing things the hard way.
Yeah, he's ice skating uphill.
So like, there's a way to make it work, but only with the villain, as far as I can see. I had a question about Blade and really the vampires also, which is a question that I always have with vampire lore, and sometimes it's answered. Like Buffy answers it. Some things do and some things don't. But does it have to be human blood? There's always that question.
Yeah, because obviously some things play with that. I always assume that if they don't, then it probably means no.
Yeah.
That's always my gut assumption.
Because I just wonder why he doesn't try anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe he has and we're just not told. But that should come up maybe, because we're told that when Whistler found him, he was feeding off of homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he ever...
people aren't animals.
What's that?
Said homeless people aren't animals, Cav.
No, I know that. That's my point. Is that we only know that he's ever like fed off of human beings. Did he ever try rats? Did he ever try any other animals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that my assumption whenever we don't talk about that is that it means no.
Yeah, so I guess so.
Mm-hmm.
Probably. I always want that explicitly stated somewhere.
Only Renfield eats rats.
Well, we're going to go ahead and give our ratings for this movie. And again, apologies to the patrons. We'll try to make sure and get that out next time. This one got away from me a little bit. Austin, I'm going to let you go first if you're so inclined.
Yeah, so I rewatched this a few months ago, and I was a little down on it, and I was a little like, oh, this wasn't as good as I remembered it being. And today, watching it both times, I had the opposite. I was like, oh yeah, no, I do really like this movie. I don't know what I was thinking last time. And I think I will give it a superhero.
Yeah, that's where I thought you would probably go.
Hmm.
I'm
guessing you're going to give it a hero.
So I'm having that thing, right? I'm back and forth where I'm like, if I'm strictly, and this is what I always did on the scripted show, if I'm strictly looking at story and how it's told, it's just a hero.
Mm-hmm.
But it's difficult because so much of what works about this movie is in performance and atmosphere and visuals, and it goes a long way to create a world that brings me some of my favorite like stylistic cool comic book looking movies. Like this is and I don't like to rate things based on like importance, but there's a lot of innovation here.
Mm-hmm. And I mean that's all part of making a movie too.
No, absolutely. And I just feel like ultimately a lot of the best storytelling here is in is in what it's doing visually. And I mean, like the action scenes are certainly serving the story. It doesn't feel like just a bunch of set pieces until you get to the end, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And even that at least has been, we've been building to it the whole film. But I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things where the way the story is told is maybe better than the story itself. But I also think that all of the setup is there. It just doesn't quite stick the landing for me in like its character arc.
What I think
for Blade himself.
Credit that this movie should get is I think it's better than like most first superhero movies, like especially in terms of the ones that are more setup-y.
Yeah, and I'm comparing this to X-Men 1 a lot, and it doesn't feel like too much of a setup film.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. No, and I would say this is quite a bit better than the first X-Men, if not a lot better.
I do too, and I don't want to get ahead of myself with that, but I imagine when we do the commentary for that probably only gets a hero from me.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think this is maybe more than a step up from that. It's also hard to compare these things when you're rating them.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But I'm inclined to go superhero. The more I'm thinking about it.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think I have to do that. Mm-hmm. I also remember Blade 2 being a better movie than this.
It absolutely is.
But I doubt if I'll end up going all the way to Legend with that.
No, but you can have like a low superhero versus a high superhero. I mean, that's what happens when you're only rating out of like 5, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just wanted to simplify the rating system for this.
Mm. No, exactly.
Because rating something through a commentary is kind of weird anyway. Like that's partly why I did that.
No, I imagine 2 will probably be a superhero for me as well.
I feel like I have to constantly justify the silly choice I made for the rating system in the show.
Mhm.
I know I ruined Superhero Rewind and the channel at large. I perfectly accept that happened. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, any last thoughts about this movie, Austin?
Bring on the like vampires.
Don't fear the Reapers.
Yeah, don't fear the Reapers.
That's what's coming next.
That should have been the subtitle. Blade, don't fear the Reapers.
Yeah, it would have been great.
Way better than the original title, Blade, don't fear Morbius.
Yeah, we didn't talk about the Morbius thing.
Yeah, the funniest thing about the Morbius thing is just they didn't have the rights to Morbius. I don't think.
So they were really ambiguous about the ending they shot, where it doesn't even look like Morbius. It's just the director in a trench coat. Literally, that's all it is.
Mhm.
On a roof.
Yeah, I think he's got like a red scarf or something.
I forget. But Karen looks over and she's like, "Oh, I guess you've got more work to do. You got to run off and deal with that guy." It's like,
There's a man on a roof. Go for it.
who is that guy? It's just this dude over there on a roof.
And it's during daytime.
But I will say, what's awkward about the ending we have is that it does feel like a scene that ends halfway in the middle of the scene.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of feels like it's supposed to be moving towards some kind of setup-y thing.
Mm-hmm. What's nice that we cut away and have like a better setup-y thing. But yeah, no, I agree. You
Yeah,
can
but
kinda see where
it's not even
cut
really a
off.
setup-y thing so much as just, okay, Blade's globetrotting and he's still doing his thing and fighting vampires, and there's still kind of that question about how much of it is saving people and how much of it is revenge. Because we didn't really talk about this. This is, in its way, kind of a revenge thriller. And I like that Blade seems very conflicted. He's not talking about it, but it's clear, I think, in everything he's doing and the few things he does say, that he's very conflicted in whether he is a hero or a like vengeance-seeking vigilante. And a big thing, of course, that makes him sympathetic and likable is that he will, he's real cold and sometimes doesn't seem to care at all about people, but he seems to lay that on too thick. And like the fact that he saves the doctor in the first place, it tells you that there's a human being in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Or that he just can't bring himself to let really attractive women die.
Well, I hope not, because when he sees her on the floor, he flashes to his mom. So.
Oh, that's awkward. That's very awkward. Yeah, I forgot about that. Is that what it is? Is it that he saves her because she reminds him of his mom?
Mm-hmm.
I never had that. I mean, I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it is.
Oh. Interesting.
Otherwise, he would just stomp on her head. And then go.
There's some Freudian psychology in this movie.
There is, because his mom is also like weirdly sexual with him.
Yeah.
And then he stabs her in the stomach with a bone.
Hey, Austin, you want
Do
to
with
tell
that what you want.
everybody what we're doing next time? In 2 weeks, folks?
Next time we're doing the 2 Ultimate Avengers movies, which was requested by somebody, but I don't know who.
I don't have it in front of me.
You're supposed to know.
But yes, that's requested. Well, I can pull it up.
It's fine. We're just frauds.
Well, no, I didn't have to ask you to do it because nobody would have even known it was requested. I don't know why I did that. Anyway, yeah, so folks were asking me at the beginning why we didn't do the Batman vs. Dracula this time as we initially announced, and it's just because I didn't have time to deal with 2 movies this week with everything else going on in my life. So
Chewbacca's lover, he just said in the chat.
We're going to put that one off. Oh, thanks, Chewbacca's lover, because I had that open, and I was just about to mention that. But anyway, so we had Patreon pick that for a review or for a commentary, and we will do that one immediately after Ultimate Avengers, but that was a request before that, and since we didn't do the double feature tonight, we wanted to go ahead and get that knocked out and out of the way. So yeah, and just the first one was requested, but we thought we would tackle on the second one. So
they're real short.
They're real short, and it'll be a real easy night, and we'll still split up the videos like we usually do, probably, but.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll do those all in one evening. I'll try to reread at least the first Ultimates book, because that informs that movie, if I can find the time to do that. And yeah, I haven't watched those in a million years either.
Nope, and those were also movies that were played a lot on the Saturday night movie thing that I used to watch.
And then obviously this will be into the new year now, probably, well after a month. But the very next one we'll do after that, we're going to let Patreon pick between, and I won't reveal them now, but pick between a few movies that I have never done a superhero rewind on. Because lately we've been going to a lot of really early ones, and I want to knock out something that we've not touched. Kind of like I did toward the beginning of this series when we did, like, the Suicide Squad.
There's some crazy ones in there. In that list.
Yeah, Austin helped me put together a list of 4, and I guess I'm teasing that, but we'll put that out for a poll sometime soon.
Mm-hmm. There's one specific one that I've seen like multiple comments asking us to do.
Tonight?
No, just like in general, since we started doing the show.
Oh, because I was gonna be like, oh, that's gonna win.
No, yeah,
that one probably will. That probably
will win. But there is one specifically that people want us to fight about that's on there.
I was gonna say, is it the one we're gonna fight about? I bet some people can guess it now after you said that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, everybody, once again, we sure appreciate you. And as always, I'm going to read down the list of Patreon producers. And once again, $10 tier gets you access to, or it allows you to become a producer. One of the perks of that is I will say your name very dramatically at the end of this. Oh, something else I meant to mention about Blade, I'll just tack this on real quick, speaking of theatricality and being dramatic, is I know, Austin, you don't care for what you've seen of Buffy. I'm a big Angel fan, and I was a little bit frustrated watching this movie again, because I didn't remember just how much that show rips off from this movie. And the timing...
Oh, yes. Somebody earlier mentioned, I think it was Chewbacca's Lover. It was Chewbacca's Lover or Bob the Hunt, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Mentioned that Pearl character is straight up in Buffy as well.
I thought there was a character kind of like that. Yeah, we'll keep the timing in mind. So this comes out in 97. Angel starts in, I think, 01, because it's during Buffy's 4th season. And so plenty of time to be informed by this movie. And some of the, editing choices, particularly with that chase scene that driving scene that we made fun of, with the frame rate and all that, they do their transitions kind of like that in that show, and just a lot of like the way Angel moves and stuff seems very based on Blade. And those two characters have the same thing where they're just super dramatic when nobody's looking for no good reason. They've always got to make an entrance, and and not to say that that's going too far and having that character also do that, but it just reminded me a lot of that. And also they're both set in LA.
Except one character says cool things like about ice skating and one doesn't. And if he tried, he would look dumb.
Well, sometimes he says cool things, and sometimes he says things that he thinks are cool, and then he thinks better of them. And
he is a Whedon character.
But I don't know. That can be amusing though. I enjoy that.
Described every character he's ever written.
Yeah, but it works better with Angel than anybody. And they have a lot of fun with that because he's very old and trying to be trendy. Well, anyway, thanks for being here, and thanks a lot to our Patreon producers, including the following. One reply: Bill Mills, Chewbacca's Lover, the aforementioned Chewbacca's Lover, Dr. Hello, Elliot Slater, Gusta123, Hayden Spring, Jeff Niederhofer, Joe Turner, Joe Gira, Matt Bat 68, Michael Martin, Super Billy, Thomas Edgehill, Adam March, Damon Begay, Hot Soup, Jacob Schneider, Jonathan Campbell, Kareem Roberts, Matthew Brody, Michael Austin Gulick, Miguel Rodriguez, this guy, the Day Ghost, and Wendell Jones.
You're like Jeff one, I think, is new. I don't remember hearing that name before.
I think I've read that once or twice. He's been with us for a little bit now.
Maybe I'm wrong. Sorry, Jeff, if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you should be. You should be. Anyway,
you should.
No, he doesn't invert his word order in that particular line.
I know, but
because Yoda used to not always feel the need to do that.
I know, but if it was in the prequels, he would have said, "B, you should."
Oh yeah, because if it was prequels, he'd be like, "Around you, a perimeter create."
Well, if you're going that far, you'd be like, "You be should." It would just be completely in a blender.
Oh my god, that's terrible.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, we're going to get going. Once again, I was Captain Logan. This was Austin the Day Ghost. We'll be back for another one of these in 2 weeks. And join us next week for, I think, we should be able to get another history video on. And we're working on the impromptu history of superhero movies. We've done, 6 of those now? Are we coming on to 7?
Are we at 6? Okay, we've done
5 or 6
pre-movies. Batman.
I mean, I can look it up real quick if you're gonna.
The 90s, 2000s Marvel, beginning of MCU.
Maybe we've just done 5,
like 2010.
Yeah. Okay. So no, that.
No, I think we are at 6.
No, that is 6. But yeah, so next time we should be getting into
just 2012.
We might only do 12, but I want to say we'll do that big year, Avengers and Dark Knight Rises, up into the birth of the DCEU. We'll see what happens.
I don't think we'll get that. Oh no,
Man of Steel is 13.
Yeah, no. I think we'll do 12 and 13. It's probably.
And I'm sorry, I'm trying to end the show, but there's another big point that I thought I was gonna build my whole discussion around with this, or my part of the discussion.
We got to start over. Everybody get the timestamps 0.
I don't mean to sound like I'm leaving you out, Austin, but just the big stuff I want to talk about with this, and I forgot to ever mention it, but that is Blade would have been an excellent place to start a shared universe, particularly for the grittier side of Marvel. And that's not to say that stuff like Spider-Man and the cosmic stuff and all of that can't exist in this universe. You definitely could build out from rated R hardcore land into more family-friendly stuff eventually. It would be interesting to see something, drop into family-friendly from super hardcore like that. I mean, I don't think Hollywood would have ever gone that way with anything, because you'd have kids that would want to watch the starting point for stuff and can't because it's violent and bloody and it has a lot of F-bombs and all of that. So, that probably wouldn't have happened, but it's very easy and almost hurts your feelings to not see, Ghost Rider in this world and Daredevil in this world, and really everything we were making in the early 2000s with Marvel. And again, that's another place where I used to not give Blade enough credit for its influence, because those darker Marvel projects that we start cranking out in the 2000s, it's gotta happen because of this movie. I mean, X-Men helps too, because that was for a somewhat older crowd, but you get this movie and you're like, it's so weird that Daredevil and Ghost Rider don't exist in this, and Punisher too. All of that stuff should be in the same world.
No, and his Shang-Chi probably could have worked in this world too. But when you said shared universe, you know what I really want?
Oh no.
Is Blade meeting the Guardians.
No, of course.
Some raccoons are always trying to steal prosthetic limbs.
Anyway, I guess I just had to tack that on because I was going to build the whole thing around that.
Well, and this director almost made half of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious.
But if it was for other studios, it would have been so weird, because it wouldn't be. Well, and we didn't really talk much about that either. He has a really interesting non-career, because he doesn't make anything after. He also directs League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which is on my short list for movies to talk about that I've never done a rewind on. And he doesn't do. Just because I've never talked about it. It's not good. But he never, or I don't think it's good, he doesn't make anything else after that, but nearly makes projects a lot like this, and some of them even Marvel things, all the way up to like 2013.
Hmm. Well, yeah, and I can like completely see what his version of Shang-Chi looks like. I can see what he almost made Clash of the Titans. I can see what his version of that would have looked like in my head. I can't see what his version of Ghost Rider looks like. Like that's probably the one I'm the most curious about.
Really? I don't think that's too far of a stretch from this.
Well, it's mainly because I don't know that he would make like a kung fu movie, and
Oh, and you're like, how does that work for Ghost Rider?
it would have to be a like more supernatural. That's what I mean by like just based off of this. I don't entirely see what his Ghost Rider looks like in my head, like I do with say Shang-Chi.
But this is still a big special effects movie, and he's got a lot of like disintegrating skeletons and all of that. So like, you can kind of see it. I mean, I can see that as well as I can see him doing a Clash of the Titans.
We also don't do like a lot of driving stuff in this. Like a lot of driving action.
Yeah, that one big shot of Blade on a motorcycle coming into a building.
But to be fair, like the movie they did end up making, he probably would have really leaned into the Western sensibilities of Ghost Rider.
Yeah. But he probably would have done that stuff better. And he would have cast this guy.
Also Sam Elliott.
Yeah. He would have, no, he would have cast this guy instead of Sam Elliott.
Or Sean Connery.
Yeah, and I didn't even mention his music career and how interesting it was that he was even an actor. Like he was part of the Highwaymen with Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings and all those guys.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, I mean he had a huge music career. He was bigger as a country musician than he was as an actor.
Oh, thank you, Bob the Hunt, because I actually forgot about this and I don't know how because he wrote literally everything.
Everything.
Goyer also worked on a Ghost Rider movie, so there's a chance it could have been the same thing.
You mean Ghostbusters? Oh no, Ghost Rider.
Ghost Rider.
Ghost Rider. Oh, sorry, I looked at that wrong and thought it said Ghostbusters because he put an S at the end of it. He wrote Ghost Riders.
When I think part of Goyer's script gets turned into Spirit of Vengeance, like, I think he has a writing credit on that movie because of it.
That should have been the sequel to Ghost Rider, though, right? We should have brought in like all of the different people that have been Ghost Rider and we called it Ghost Riders.
Ghost Riders, no driving home.
No driving home. Brilliant. Okay, well, I hope you guys enjoyed the epilogue to our. We just gave you more of a review after the commentary, and in Russia too. You guys might not be able to tell, but we did that from Russia with love.
We're using our universal translators. You're hearing it in English, but we're actually speaking in Russia right now.
We didn't even
Russia talk.
We're great at that. Wesley Snipes talking in Russian was awesome, by the way.
Yes, the entire second movie should have just been in Russian.
That would have been great. We also didn't. You alluded once to James Bond, and I just wanted to mention there's also a lot of Bond in that movie.
There's a lot of Bond in like everything.
I know, but like it was intentional. There were a lot of homages.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially like the bad guy lair and stuff.
Well, like I said, that it's like the exact same set, or not set, but like the table and the chairs as Dr. Evil's lair.
Yeah, that's my big takeaway from this movie is it's every movie you've ever seen. I never had that with this.
Well, and it's funny because I'm pretty sure the first Austin Powers comes out before this.
Yeah. Isn't that 90? Is it 97? Maybe it's the same year.
I want to say it's 97 because the third movie is 2002 or maybe 2003.
No, the third movie is 03. That's right.
Yeah. I just know it's after Die Another Day, which is 02, because there's a whole thing where they got sued.
Oh yeah, that's right. We've talked about that. Somewhere. Probably wasn't even on camera.
Yeah, probably not.
Folks, we appreciate you. I'm going to be able to sleep okay at night now because I brought up the like 4 things I thought I was going to bring up in the commentary that I didn't talk about.
Well, you know what the big thing this movie takes from Austin Powers?
Well, I don't know. I didn't notice a lot of phallic imagery.
It's that this movie is really groovy, baby. End the stream.
Well done. Well done. I should have expected that. Bob the Hun, it's 97. This movie is 98. Oh, this movie is 98. I don't know. I'm getting in the weeds with that because we just did Spawn. That's why. Okay, so this was 98. That was 97.
That is correct.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, Dan Schneider. Yes, I messed that up right here in the moment. Anyway, I'm going to go to bed. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and we'll see you again next time. Once again, I was Captain Logan. This was Austin, the Day Ghost.
Bye, guys.
See you later, folks.